My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So I'm Cloud Hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am Cloud Hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. I am Mike Gibbs. I am here with Mark Milovanovic, and we're here to help you build your technology career. Maybe you've got questions on how to become a cloud architect or get your first cloud architect job. Maybe you're curious on how to get your first cybersecurity job, or your first network architect job, or network engineer job, or AI engineering, or AI architect role. Well, that's why we're here. I am the CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I've been working in technology now for, well, over 25 years now, and I've been an architect for over 25 years as well. Mark is a networking expert. He's a CCIE. He's our chief technology officer, and he's been working in technology for about 10 years too. So I can tell you what Mark and I wished we had in the beginning was a roadmap. I can tell you both Mark and I, when we started our careers in networking and telecommunication systems, we didn't really know where to go. And because we didn't really know what we needed, we took a bunch of zigzags. It cost time, effort, and money. And the key is, I don't want to see you make those same mistakes. I don't want to see you make those same zigzags. I want you going straight in the straight line to the top for wherever you want to go. And the only way to really know how to do that sometimes is by asking people that have already been there. So I spent, a quarter of a century as a principal architect. Mark is a network architect and an expert, and he's our chief technology officer. So ask us your questions. Before we begin, while you're asking those questions, we'll tell you about some 3 things while you ask questions that are free to help you in your career. I wanted to tell you that we have a completely free AWS Solutions Architect Associate and More Training Boot Camp that we're going to be doing in a few weeks, 3 to 4 weeks from now. We're going to be teaching the full AWS Solutions Architect certification, plus additional cybersecurity, additional networking, and even some of the new AI things that AWS has to offer that are outside of the Solution Architect certification. So come and join us. It's going to be live. It'll be free. We'll teach for a little bit. You'll ask questions, and we'll have plenty of opportunity for you to learn. So come join. It's completely free. Now, if you're looking to get your first cloud architect job, you need to know what an architect is, what we do, what hiring managers are actually looking for. And I'm going to tell you, 99% of the population that trains to be a cloud architect learns all the wrong skills. And then when you go, you know what the right skills are, and you train for the right skills, people get hired constantly and easily as architects, regardless of their background, if they have the right skills. So I want you to know what those skills are. My team will pop that in the chat box, the description of LinkedIn and YouTube for you there. Come join. It'll be on Zoom. We'll talk. You can ask questions. If you want us to assess you, interview you, what have you, we'd be more than happy to, and it's completely free. And between now and then, I've got a document, an ebook, if you will, that our team wrote. And it's actually the skills and how to become an architect summarized in an ebook. And I've gotten people at this point hired as architects now at Apple and Amazon, at Cisco and Google and Microsoft and IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Zscaler, Palo Alto Networks, British Broadcasting Company, pretty much anybody who's anybody. I've trained people and they're working there as architects. So a lot of the skills that they need are all listed in this guide. So please get the guide. It's completely free. So ask us your questions and let's do what we can to assist you building your career. Mark, do you want to say anything before we begin while we wait for questions to pop in?
Well, I think it'd be appropriate to say hi to everybody, first of all. It's fantastic to be back here to see everybody. I'm always very honored, very appreciative of anyone who can make some time to join us. As Mike mentioned, we've been at the stage of career where we hope that we at least had somebody who can point us into the right direction. Not necessarily do the work for us, but give us some ideas of which direction we can head without having to kind of walk through a labyrinth, right? You want some type of pathway, some type of learning path that you can take to be able to accomplish whatever your goals may be. This doesn't just have to be technical, it can be non-technical. So we hope that we can provide you guys with this on a weekly basis. And for everybody that's here, please don't be shy. Ask your questions. It could be in regards to anything technical that you might have a question for, or in regards to just basic career development, what direction you might need to go. So don't be shy about that, please. First question from Tin Man. Hey, Mark, for someone hoping to move into cloud architecture from a consumer sales role, what advice would you have to get started? No technology yet. So what I would do in that regard is if you're coming from a specific sales role with no technical knowledge, you're going to have to learn IT fundamentals. So that's going to be the first step that you're going to have to take. Those are going to include learning about operating systems. They're going to have to include working about networking, some security, some compute services. Those are going to be your majority when it comes to your actual cloud architecture. You're going to have to learn about architecture itself. And the reason I mentioned that is as you go through this journey of trying to become a cloud architect, you'll notice that a lot of the training that you have out there is implementation based, does operations. And that is not where you want to be steering towards. You want to be able to steer towards the direction where you can take your technical aptitude and apply it to your business aptitude. Because in the end, you're going to become more valuable being able to take technical knowledge and try to solve a problem that a business may have, or what might be more advantageous is to optimize the business, because most businesses are already going to be in stage. Now, since you're coming from a sales role, there's something else that I would suggest you do, and that will be doing a kind of like a breakdown of the current skill sets that you have. Those could be technical, could be non-technical. You write them down if you have anything technical. And then you see which of those skills you can transfer as well. And that way you do kind of like a reverse engineering type where you're going to try to figure out what skills do I need. And then this is your part. Not a very important part is find good training. Believe it or not, architects are not born. Heck, not even engineers are born. It requires training. Now, for those that always tell you experience, 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 you can have experience in something doing the same thing for 10 years. That doesn't make you competent. That's why I mentioned get good training. If it's with us, you're very welcome to take it. If it's with somebody else, you're very welcome to do that too. But make sure that the training that you do get addresses the array that you require, meaning your compute services, your networking, your security, your storage area networks, and also your business skills, right? You need business acumen to move into an architecture role. So that will be my advice to you to get started. Focus on the fundamentals across those domains. Figure out what your transferable skills are. What do you think, Mike?
So great advice, Mark. So I think you have to understand, coming from sales, you're actually in an advantaged position. I can remember one person about 2 years ago, he came to me and he said, Mike, I'm in sales, but I want to work in cloud computing. And I said, great. I said, we can teach you how to be an architect. And, about 6 months later, he was employed by AWS. He did take the job as a technical account manager, but, he had a great job there and he was very happy. I can also tell you people like Al Legister, who came to us from sales, Wallace Agana from sales, got their first job as cloud architects. Well, one was a cloud architect, one was an enterprise architect. Al Legister the sales rep for Kimberly Clark went to Deloitte as a senior solution architect as his first job. Wallace Agana went to JP Morgan Chase. So the key is to realize that in sales, it's a good thing. So many people misconfuse architecture for engineering. They're thinking they're going to build all these hands-on things, and they don't realize that what we do in our job is to design a solution, to present the solution, and sell the solution, to manage stakeholders, which is something that you have to do and learn how to do in sales, to get people to want to work on you, which is very sales-oriented. When you need to lead people or exercise influence, the ability to ethically persuade or sell is very critical to the architect role. So you have that. Now, the next thing that you need to understand is the working of the underlying technology, how that stuff all works, which is the exact opposite of what you need for systems administration, which is how to build it. So we have to understand architecture is design. We don't code, we don't configure, we don't use infrastructure as code, we don't touch Linux, we don't touch Python, we don't touch any of that. The cloud engineers deal with that, DevOps engineers deal with that, systems administrators. But as architects, we're more on the executive side. So you do need to have good technical competency, though. And what do I mean by technical competency? How does the technology work? And how does the technology get integrated together in a manner that's going to optimize business performance? It's very different to go to a router and type a few commands. For example, router BGP 65312, neighbor 192.168, remote AS 65313. That's easy. That's administration. But Tin Man, being able to plan what happens before you type that into those commands in, and then determine, where that's going to place routes in your network, and can your router support the amount of memory that's going to be needed in CPU cycles to support those number of routes that are going to be coming in. Do you need to prioritize traffic in one direction or another? How would you prioritize that traffic? What path that attributes could you manipulate? That is architecture. So you're going to have to be taught it. It's kind of like flying an airplane. You can't, this is not one of those things that you can try to do for yourself. You have to be taught. It's like medicine, and that's where I come from. You can learn how the heart works. You can, and you can learn that on your own as good as you want. And you could study that for years and learn a lot about the heart. You could learn about the kidneys, yeah, but if you don't actually have that medical training, you don't understand how the eyes connect to the back of the brain and the way the cranial nerves work and the circulatory system and the heart and lungs and their interplay with regards to the kidneys and the livers and how all those parts of the body work. You need to be taught that. That's architecture. So there's that. But, get training in that, and learn how to do anything. You need training. You want to learn to fly a plane? You need training. You're not going to figure that out on your own. You want to be a doctor? You need to go for training. You're not going to figure it out. Architects careers pay at least as much as physicians. So that. And then and I'm not saying you have to get it from us. I don't care where you get it. I just want you to be successful, Tin Man. But get the training in the underlying technology, how that technology works, and then how to put the pieces and parts in a manner that optimizes business value. That is your architecture piece. Now, if you're in sales, you probably give presentations all the time. If you are in sales where you're delivering presentations to the board, you're good to go. If you've never given a presentation to the board, get some training there. And of course, we train our clients on all these skills. But if you're not with us, get them somewhere. Learn how to respond to RFIs, RFPs, and queues, because that's going to be what we do in the job. Learn how to build teams, learn how to lead teams, learn how to manage stakeholders, learn how to manage vendors. And you have all these skills, plus what I told you, you'll be able to find a job as an architect anywhere. When you can design a system to maximize business performance, you've maximized and you fully understand architecture, and you will get offers constantly. So that's the thing. Of course, you'll need to build your brand a certain way and things like that, but go out there and get the best skills.
Fantastic. The next question from Cloud Doctor. Hello, everyone. What emerging trends do you see as the most influential in the cloud computing industry? I'll let you go first, Mike.
So Cloud Doctor, we have a couple of big things that are actually going on. We have a brand new disruptive technology, AI. And when I say brand new, I worked on AI systems 20 years ago. David Lithicum, who's the architect of our AI architect program, has been working on AI systems for over 30 years. What's new? The power computationally that we have at the GPU level is so good right now. We can do things now that we never could have possible. On a simple video gaming card like an RTX 4090, we have more compute power than we did in data centers that I worked on that cost millions of dollars to build in 2000. So when we think about that, and then we think about these super high-end GPUs that aren't designed for video games, they're designed for compute power. And we think about companies having thousands of these, the amount of compute that can be done. And because of this, businesses can adapt quicker than ever before. They can design new products. They can have the employees that they have operate more efficiently. They can get rid of their inefficient employees and then use that to invest more in technology and more into the people they have that are contributing to that company being successful. They can, do so many different things, better sales, better customer service, better personalized reach out to things. So that is two things. One is AI will literally change the world in the next 10 years or less. But AI is going to make businesses need to adapt and improvise and overcome much more quickly because all of a sudden they've got an AI competitor that they didn't know about. So businesses will need that. So why am I saying all this? Look, cloud computing is not cheaper. And most organizations have found when they took their systems from the data center to the cloud, it cost them about 250% of what it did prior to that. That's David Lithicum's numbers, but that's about what I've seen as well. But what cloud computing is it is agile. You can adapt, you can change on the fly. And in the world of AI, where businesses need more agility, AI means cloud. Because look, you can run all these AI systems in your data center, and some people will, but where's the data going to be? What kind of scalability do they need? What kind of adaptability they need? How fast can they go from one thing to another thing? AI is going to drive that. And the cloud makes that possible. So we're going to see a lot more cloud computing for big data, a lot more for AI and generative AI. And I think you'll see, what I predicted and told people we're going to see many years ago. Many years ago, when I started our Cloud Architect program, and I told our students, if you only know AWS, you'll be unemployable. That it's never going to be good enough for anything. And I said, give it a year or two, and organizations are all going to be multi-cloud. Well, now 98% of organizations are multi-cloud, and if all you know is one cloud provider, there's no work in the architecture world. And there's no place in your designs, because the reality is AWS does some things better than Azure, and Azure does some things better than AWS, and Google does things better. There's micro clouds that are performance tuned for certain applications. The data center gives you the best power, best performance, best security, and guess what? The lowest cost. But it doesn't scale the same way, and it requires so much more manual intervention. So distributed clouds, more multi-cloud, and much more movement towards agility and agility-based things. That's what I see, Cloud Doctor. And I've spent a lot of time as a as a tech futurist in the last 25 years as an architect. How about you, Mark?
Well, AI, of course, is the elephant in the room, so to say. But it's because of what AI brings to the table. We're noticing that a lot of the underlying technologies also have to be bolstered up. I would say that always infrastructure is very important, meaning how to bolster up the network and the storage area, so that we can support these workloads, especially with AI coming in. So data is going to be quite important. So with that in mind, again, it's one of those layered approaches. But what I've definitely noticed is security and a much more bigger push towards cloud native applications. And what I mean with that is we've had this little trend going on where some of the larger companies, they're pulling back their workloads to the data center, because they found out that the way cost works in the cloud is not very transparent. They got huge builds. Also, again, your applications work best when they're designed for something like a cloud environment, right? So that's why we have the cloud native push for the applications. Now, not everybody is ready to, of course, reinvest the money and try to re-engineer the applications to work on that. So we have to find a happy medium. So generally speaking, what we're seeing now is that security is going to take a forefront, and as well as on how to improve our infrastructure. Now, what I mean with security is you'll see a lot of the vendors from Aviatrix, from Cisco, Juniper, they're all pushing another security solution. We're hoping that within maybe a few years, what we'll see is some of the open source projects take a little bit more root instead of something that's more vendor locked in, and then see if we can figure out how these workloads that are going to be interchangeable, as Mike mentioned, some are going to be set on the data center, the other ones are going to be in the cloud, how we can protect them, possibly even at the kernel level when that happens. So those are the type of trends I see. That's why we've been talking a lot within our private community when it comes to our training in regards to bolstering up security knowledge on how to design systems that are going to be secure all the way up from cloud towards your data center, even to physical infrastructure. So if you're looking for a real trend, AI, security, that's going to be what I see going forward, at least for the next year or two, until we get a little bit more of a foundation on how we can do so. And that's going to couple in something that Mike and I always talk about. SD-WAN is going to become a lot more prevalent with the connectivity options towards the cloud. And then, of course, this whole idea that just right now is a framework, they're trying to standardize it, and that's going to be the SASE framework in regards to how can we take networking as a service and security as a service, merge them without having vendor lock-in. So I hope that answers your question, Cloud Doctor. Next question from Ada AC. I have AWS Cloud Solution Architect and Developer certification. What's the best 3 other certifications I can get? Not only AWS. I'm open for all jobs because it's hard to get the first job.
Okay, so ADAC, the first thing I need to know is what job you actually want. Because no one will ever give you a job based upon a certification except one certification, the Cisco Certified Internet Expert. And that's because that will take the average person 2 to 3 years to pass, $20,000 to $30,000 to pass that exam. And you have to invest in incredible training and have good skills, in most cases, enough to do the job with that certification. I'm not recommending that. What I want to know, ADAC, is what you would like to do. You have a cloud developer, which means if you desire to be a software developer, that is supporting you. So the question I would then have is, what would your development skills be like? What languages do you know? What developer tooling systems would you know? What development processes do you know? Software deployment methodologies, those kind of things. If you're in the developer world. If you want to be an architect, I'm going to tell you right now, a developer certification is going to make you look bad. The architect is an executive. It is not someone that touches the technology. It is someone that designs systems to improve business performance. So when I have people that are architects that have an AWS SysOps on their certification, an AWS DevOps certification, and an AWS Developer Associate, and I'll tell you the difference between architect skills versus this. They go on interviews, people ask them tech questions for engineering jobs, not architect jobs. In ADAC, I had one student, actually, after that, every student believed me, and he went on interview after interview, and he kept going on bad interviews. And he's like, Mike, I don't understand. These jobs all sound like DevOps engineer jobs or software developer jobs, not architect jobs. What am I doing wrong? And I said to Arun, I said, can I look at your resume? Can we fix it? And I took that developer certification off, and I took that DevOps certification off, and I took that SysOps certification, which is maintenance, off. And then we put down all his architecture skills and all the architecture training that he had. He went on interviews, he had the skills, and he got 2 jobs. So it's about branding. So if you're going to be an architect, you're going to need networking knowledge, data center knowledge, business knowledge, leadership knowledge, sales skills knowledge, and all of that. And it's not covered in any certification. So if you're going to be an architect, you need to learn system design. What is taught in an AWS Solution Architect Professional? Here's the name of our object storage. It's S3. Here's how you configure it. These are the limitations of it. Guess what? As an architect, ADAC, you will never set up AWS S3. You will not touch your customer's technology. You won't be allowed to in most companies. You'll be designing a system, but what you do need to understand is object storage. And you do need to also understand how you're going to synchronize your object storage as across 2 or 3 cloud providers. And you're going to need to understand, what are the performance limitations of object storage, and what is this concept with the metadata, and how can we use that metadata? How can we integrate that object storage into big data because the information that it contains in it? How can we search? How can we analyze? How can we inference and make better decisions from this data? How can this object storage be integrated into a data lake? That's architect knowledge, and it's not taught in a certification. So ADAC, I want to know what you need. Now, by comparison, ADAC, if you told me I wanted to be a cloud engineer, well, that would change everything. Now you need to be a deep technology professional. I'd still say get the AWS Solutions Architect Professional as an intro to the AWS Cloud. I would then say potentially get something Kubernetes related and maybe a Red Hat certified engineer. and then learn Terraform and learn Python, and then learn Bash shell scripting and Windows PowerShell scripting, and you'd have and learn some DevOps, and you'd have a great cloud engineering career. But as you can see, each of these careers are so different than each other. So the first thing we need to do is find out what career you want, then figure out the training needs that you need for that career, then figure out a way for you to get the relevant experience, because, people come to me every day with big binders of all their cloud engineering projects, and they want to go on an architect interview, and I say, that's great, but you built the binder of stuff for someone else's career. Would you like to change careers? No, I want to be an architect. And I say, well, I'm sorry, we can't use any of this. So let's start from scratch. And that's why we do these questions and answers. So all that's going to need to change based upon your career. So ADAC, what job do you want? You tell me what job you want. I will help you build the path to get there. And I've gotten people hired for 20 years now, and I really want to help you, but I need to know where you're going. Certifications don't do anything. They help you get an interview. The skills, and so it means they do help that because they help you get an interview, but you need the knowledge for the job. So I need to know the job you want so we can give you the knowledge or tell you what knowledge you need to obtain.
So what best 3 certifications? CCIE, CCDE, CSSP, those are all great certifications. Well, why would you want to get them, right? So that's going to be the question. So unless we know exactly what you're going for, if you're going for an engineering role, if you're going for an actual architect role, and I don't mean the architect role as described by the cloud service providers, no offense to them, right? But even if you just want to be a solution architect, that's where you're going to have to focus on the non-technical skills. And if this is going to be your first job, so I'm going to make some assumptions here, so because we don't know the details, but let's make this assumption. What can you do to improve your odds on your first job? Well, depending on what you go for, how do you set yourself apart from other people? I can tell you from experience, it's not going to be by having 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 more certifications. That's, well, okay, be honest, that will set you apart, just not in the best way, preferably, but that will set you apart. But when it comes to the actual job interview, think of it this way. You want to be able to present something that all the other candidates don't have. And when it comes to the technical field, and it pains me to really say that because it unfortunately should be part of the curriculum of any technical curriculum, is these soft skills that we talk about. It's the non-technical skills. How would you communicate with somebody else the information you already know, right? How many people find it difficult just to explain the concepts of, let's say, virtual local area networks, just in a way that the actual interviewer can understand? What is the application of that technology? Not the configuration, because configuration, we can look up. Mike and I can tell you for a fact on the CCIE, they actually give you the configuration guides. If you don't know how to configure it, you can just look it up, copy, paste, and you're done. But the question is, what is it and what does it do? That's really the question that you need to answer. So I would say, as your first job, improve your communication skills, verbally, written, and learn how to be a good team player. How would you do that? That's your disposition as a person. Do you come off as a person that brings the team down or that lifts the team up? And that could be done by simply how you speak, the words that you say, how you say it, your tonality. Do you speak negatively? Do you speak positively? You mentioned it's hard to get a first job. Is that something that you vocalize constantly on social media? Is that something that comes across in the tone of voice when you speak to the recruiter or the hiring manager? So those are things that you want to then be able to avoid. You want to speak positively. What is it that you can bring to the community that's going to be appealing? So, and trust me, it's not going to be the tech necessarily. It's what you do with the tech. So basically the soft skills, that's what I would say. Where you can learn them, there's plenty of good books that you can read. I would always suggest pick up the business books because it does 2 things. It teaches you some business acumen, but at the same time, it also improves your communication skills because you learn how these people and those type of roles actually communicate. So that's going to be important because remember, hiring managers, recruiters, they're not techie people most of the time. They know a little bit, but what are they? They're business people, salespeople. You want to be able to communicate with them, help them so they can help you. So that's what I would suggest for your first job. Work on your communication skills, how you present yourself. The tech, listen, we're talking first job, we're talking entry, right? Nobody expects you to have 50 years of experience. That's going to be impossible. So don't worry about that. So that would be my suggestion on that. And where you get that training, that's up to you. I'm always going to be a little bit biased to our training. I actually enjoy our training. I've taken it myself. It's fantastic. We get good feedback by the students. Just, I will put this fair warning on it. If you do our training, come ready to work. It seriously is going to take some work. You're going to have to be on camera. You're going to have to practice your presentation, your communication skills, right? So that's the benefit of joining a training program. If you're going to do it on your own, simulate that. As you learn these things from the books, record yourself on camera. See how you talk. What's your gesture like, your modulations, your facial expressions, things like that. I've done it. I know Mike has done it too. We've all done it. It's going to be a little cringe-worthy at first, right? Because you're like, I don't like listening to myself and I like to watch myself, but stick with it. And I think it will greatly help you.
Absolutely. And the key to remember is you can do anything you want, anything. All you need to go is the right path. But the reason I mention, and I want everybody to understand this, where I talk about your certifications needing to match. If a doctor came over to take care of your family member and they had a degree that said PhD in electrical engineering, not medicine, would you be comfortable with them taking care of your family? You would see them as an electrical engineer, not a physician. Equally smart, but a different kind of person. When someone comes to me and they want to be a network engineer, and here's what I see: a CCNP, a CCDP, or a CCIS, or a JNCIS. This person's worked really hard to get this because they worked to get something hard. When I see someone that's got certifications in 5 different people's careers, the first thing that comes to me is this person's unfocused. I need someone that's really good at what I want to hire him for. I don't care how good my physician is at flying an airplane. I don't care if my physician is a lawyer too. I care if my physician can take good care of me. And as both a hiring manager and an executive, I can tell you when we hire people, it's because we have a certain need and we're looking for the person to fulfill that need. And most people, when you interview them, and I've interviewed 6,000 people and you ask them questions, they can't give you an answer that makes you feel comfortable. And here's the reason why. They're all smart. They're all motivated. It's that they've spread themselves so thin by learning everybody else's job other than their own. And when they come to you on an interview and you interview them and you ask them questions that they would need to know to be able to do their job, they can't answer them. That's why I've spent the last 20 years getting people hired at all these great companies by focusing on what they learn to be experts at their job versus someone else. Only in tech do people try to learn somebody else's job. You don't have airplane pilots trying to moonlight as lawyers. You don't have a dentist trying to moonlight as a surgeon. They do dentistry. A surgeon does surgery. But in tech, it's like if we get certified and all this other stuff, but the problem is it backfires and we become good at everybody else's job, not our own. And then we don't have a job. So I think that was great. If you've got questions, please ask them. As a reminder, on Thursday, we're going to have our completely free How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. We also have free AWS Solutions Architect training coming up for the Solution Architect Associate certification, plus some extra AI and some extra networking and some extra security. And of course, we've got a free guide to help you get your first cloud architect job. Please download it. Let's get to some more questions, and please ask them. I love answering questions.
Next question is from KML. What kind of projects or hands-on experience should I focus on to build a strong portfolio in cloud architecture?
Okay, KML, you asked a very important question, and please join us on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. I'm going to give you a secret. We don't build things as architects. We design them. We ask the executives, what is the vision for their business? We learn how the business operates, the business processes, for example. After that, we work with the company to design new business processes that are going to support their new business goals and functions. After that, what we tend to do is we then have to bring in a team of people and we evaluate the organization's data, their technology, and we design a new blueprint or a new strategy for that technology to go optimize, to go support that business goal based upon those new business processes, because technology will affect the processes. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, but 70% of architectures fail because they don't drive transformation because of this. Then, after we document the architecture, we've got to go represent it back to the client. We will have to present it and get buy-in from the stakeholders across the organization. We will have to assess the organization's readiness to be able to adopt the technology in terms of the people and their sophistication to manage the technology. Then we will craft a statement of work, respond to any RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. We will work with the sales team to go sell the order. And then when it's time for us to move on, we go to the next client or work on our next architecture. So we're never involved in hands-on KML. So understand that engineers build and architects don't. And that's why, like, I don't know if you've ever been to the Burj Al Arab in Dubai. It's gorgeous, beautiful building, looks like a sailboat. It's wonderful inside. So if a person would apply for the job and say, I built houses for the last 10 years, hire me to design the Burj Al Arab, the customer would say, no, thank you. I want an architect. The architect is not the person that builds it. You don't learn how to design a building by building buildings. So let's talk about what we do as architects. We do respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. So KML, if you could respond to some kind of RFIs, RFPs, or RFQs, that'd be something that I would put in my portfolio because it's an actually architect thing. I'll also give you some tech projects that you can do that will teach you things. Now, if you've got an architecture, if you can write a thought leadership document on how some form of technology can impact some kind of business and talk about how and why it should impact the business and cite case studies about how other businesses in similar industries have benefited from similar architectures and substantiate that, that would show why, because that's what you do with an architecture. If you could make some pseudo business cases to show, you know, the value, the expected value of the opportunities for the architecture you're going to give and how, what kind of, in terms of dollar volume and business performance, that would be there. What kind of security architectures would you come up with for what kind of solutions? How would you soar a bank that's got mission critical needs versus how would you deal with the security environment for a regular retailer? How would you design a secure demilitarized zone for remote access? How would you design a secure demilitarized zone for a web facility? How would you decide the end-to-end encryption strategy for an organization? How would you design the compute performance for your next generative AI application? How would you design your next data lake inclusive of mapping and reduction functions to give businesses what they need? That's architecture. So if I was going to build a project of hands-on experience, that's what I do. That's what my students do. My students go in there and they talk about architectures that they've designed. They can present these architectures that they're going to deal with, you know, these same kind of things. So I would show that I demonstrated architecture work. An artist has a portfolio of their art. An architect has a portfolio, typically if it's a building architect, of the buildings they've designed through their careers. They don't have anything related to the construction they do. Because you may show up with a suit and a hard hat one day just to check, but as a rule, you know, you don't see the architects out there building things. They don't have tools. So that's what you need to do. Give presentations at public conferences. Find a way to go be seen in public. Write documents, get them published in a magazine. That's the kind of stuff they do all the time. We do it all the time as architects. So I can tell you in 25 years as an architect, I didn't touch the technology. I mean, I did when I was an engineer before I became an architect, which didn't teach me architecture at all. It taught me engineering. But, you know, in that time, I wrote a lot of documents. You know, I was published everywhere. I spoke at conferences multiple times per week. I wrote thought leadership documents. I consulted the clients. I gave presentations. But no, that's what we're doing. So build this portfolio of that. Now, what kind of tech projects could you do? So here's what I have my students do. You're going to need a server for this. We provide servers to our students in our training, but you're going to need a server. Go out there and buy a server with 30 to 40 cores in it. They're not that expensive. You get them for about $800 or $1,000. If you're students of mine, you have access to these servers, but if not, get one. On this server, you know, set up VMware, start virtualizing certain things on the server, creating some virtual machine, create file servers the hard way. Because if you know how to do it the hard way, it's nothing to do it on the cloud. Set up LAMP stacks, set up Active Directory structures, and then build yourself a cloud on this thing. Build yourself an OpenStack cloud. Set up the cloud networking, set up the cloud storage environment, set up the cloud compute. And when you can build your own cloud like all my students do, and all somebody else knows is how to click a couple of boxes on object storage, you stand out. And because here's the thing, KML, that employers want when they hire. I've surveyed thousands of them over the years. Here's what they want: someone that can do the job that they hired them for and do it well. They want them to be able to communicate well. They want energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the work. They want them to know that the person knows what they know and knows what they don't know. So they don't like take down the Google Cloud like it happened with the BGP misconfiguration, or the character that took down Facebook for like an entire day because he didn't understand BGP and made a misconfiguration. So they want to know that you're not going to make those kind of mistakes and cause billions of dollars of potential damage, both financial damage in terms of quantitative sales lost, and also brand damage, which can be worth, a tremendous amount as well. Then they want to know if you're going to raise the energy in the room. Are you emotionally intelligent? They want to know if you're a good team player, and they want to know if you're willing to go above and beyond. So somebody else does a couple labs on the AWS cloud. You built the cloud. Who's more competent? Who's more energetic, more enthusiastic, more passionate about the work? Who's willing to go above and beyond? And that's why I give my students access to our data centers to create clouds, design clouds. Sure, they do stuff on Azure. Sure, they do stuff on AWS. But the majority of our time is focused on doing architecture things. And I want you to know what architecture is. Designing solutions to optimize business performance. That is solution architecture. That is cloud architecture. And that is enterprise architecture. Technical architecture is designing technology. When the solution architect goes to that technical architect and says, give me something technical that's going to work here because I don't know. That's technical architecture. So I hope that makes sense. Best job in the world, KML, and I welcome you to it.
And I'm going to add this to it because Mike covered it fantastic. So I got nothing there. Mike gave you use cases on what you can do to build out your experience, and both in projects, hands-on. But I want to point something out. You mentioned specifically cloud architecture. So if you mention cloud architecture, we're not talking about solution architecture, right? There's going to be a difference. And this is where I feel like a lot of times the cloud service providers kind of get a little bit misaligned, right? A lot of people go into those type of professions and they believe, oh, I'm a cloud architect. No. You're a solution architect. You're specifically going to get trained based on the solution that this particular vendor provides. It happens to be cloud architecture that they want to provide with the cloud native applications. So from that perspective, like Mike said, go build your foundation based on the open source material that you can get your hands on so that you understand what makes it tick. Because by the time then you can start focusing on what Amazon's solution are, what Microsoft solutions are, what Oracle's, what Google is, they're going to expect you to understand these underlying technologies already. They're just going to tell you how does it work on their side, because their cloud is built out with proprietary virtualization that most of us don't have access to. But if you've built the cloud yourself, at least you understand what the building blocks of it are, even though you may not be able to replicate it 100%, because number one, unless you have a few $1 billion or trillions lying around, you're not going to be able to do it, right? So they built that infrastructure. So give that a shot. And as always, if you really want to focus on cloud and architecture, I can't emphasize this enough. Build yourself a project out based on a use case, and then figure out how do I take a technology and apply it, and then build it. Then come up with the next one. Start one with healthcare. Next time, come up with a consumer business, right? Might be retail related, and then build that infrastructure out and see how you learn from that. I think that's going to get you a lot further. And that's also what we do with our students as well. It gives them variety and also helps them to understand how the technology fits into different sectors. So that's also something very important to keep in mind. Great question, by the way, KML.
Absolutely.
And next question is from a LinkedIn user. Nice to see you here. It says, hello, and thank you for taking the time out today. What are some books to read about building business acumen skills to talk to C-suite?
So you figure your typical C-suite professional has a couple of things going for them. And I've been through it as well. They typically have an MBA. They typically have had a tremendous amount of training, additional training in leadership, training in exercising influence. I had to go through it all myself. Extra presentation training, extra executive presence training, extra emotional intelligence training, extra training on exercising influence, at least minimum of the extra training that we're talking that any of us executives have been through is an additional $100,000 beyond an MBA. And usually our companies pay for it. Mine paid for at least half of that. I was very grateful for it. Then we typically have an executive coach. And many of them have actually been executives and are actually coaching to work with us. So you're not going to be able to get it all without going through a strong training program. But what I would do is I would read the same things. And this is what I did early in my youth, which is what got me to executive status there, is I read the same things that they did. First, I went and got an MBA. And when I was in my MBA program, I kind of made a little extra challenges for myself. So you're in a finance class, they give you an MBA level finance textbook, right? Well, I looked what we used at Widener University. I found what they used at other universities, and I read both sets of books. So at least 2 books on managerial finance at the textbook at the MBA level or better. Now, marketing. You need to know some marketing. So again, 2 MBA level textbooks minimum. Now, next, and these aren't cheap books. I've already mentioned $400 a book, and I didn't even scratch the surface. But if you go to salary.com, you'll see that people with strong levels of business acumen typically earn $558,000 a year. So there's some places where you want to invest in yourself. I mean, we provide business acumen training and everything, but I have no issue with you learning how to do it and learning more. So the next thing, managerial accounting, 2 good textbooks on that. Make sure you're good. Operations management, learning how businesses operate, business processes, 2 really strong management level textbooks of them, MBA level or better. So economics, 2 good books on macroeconomics, 2 good books on microeconomics, the kind that are taught to MBAs. It may be worth going through a management level project management thing to kind of keep you think about things like the critical paths and critical flows in there. That will give you that. Then I'd start looking into the reading list that, the executives typically talk about. And some of them, like The Art of War, every executive has read it at some point in their life, whether they admit it or not. All of us at some point have had some training from the Jack Welch approach to management. All of us at some point, because he was so influential for so many years. And there's certain books that constantly come out on marketing and sales that, again, everybody in business has read Dale Carnegie. And, there's certain people that we've all actually read. So I would typically say we're reading them. And then talking to the C-suite. Well, once you understand business, then you need to understand what the C-suite actually cares about. And, for the most part, the CEO is concerned about the strategy of the organization and the net income and top line revenue. The chief financial officer is concerned with managing the finances. And in any architecture, you're going to have to negotiate with the chief financial officer in some way, shape, or form, or somebody with purchasing authority, because you're going to have to prove that your $10 million architecture will provide better business benefits than investing the $10 million somewhere else. And that's why we have to teach how to build business cases. People don't know this and they struggle on architecture. So the next thing that we're actually talking about, so, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. What do they care about? The chief information officer is concerned with, will the IT strategy I design or the team designs work and provide business value? The chief technology officer is kind of focused on the technology and see what kind of new cool technologies can kind of help the business achieve what it needs to be. The chief operating officer is concerned about running the business. So if you walk into the CEO's room and start talking about S3, security will politely escort you out, because their time is worth, $5, $10, $15,000 an hour, and they don't want to hear about S3. Now, if an architect were to walk in and they were to say, I know that your organization told me you have 2 petabytes of data, which is an incredible amount. By moving it to this type of storage that we have, we'll be able to analyze your data, make inferences of your data, and these inferences will enable you to have better predictions of what pricing will work with what types of sales strategies, better insight into your customers and what they actually desire, which could yield 13% increase in net income next year. Now you're talking to the C-suite. So that's the key. And that's why so many cloud engineers have been cloud engineers for a decade or 15 years, and they want to be architects and they struggle. And we've worked with those just like we've worked with people outside of technology and gotten them all hired. It doesn't matter your background, but you're thinking right. You're thinking about building these books. So go out there and do it, and go start giving presentations too. and find a place to get people that know what they're looking for to give you the right coaching on your presentations, because that can easily make $100,000 a year difference in your salary, just your presentation skills at the executive architect level, principal architect and above.
Yeah, I'm going to add, I personally always enjoyed CIO Magazine. I think it's a great little online magazine that you can read. It's very tailored towards business, especially the CIO. And guess what? Mostly it's free. So that's going to be a good resource that you can read up and try to start understanding from the perspective of one of these executives. How do they see it? In this case, it's a CIO, but it's going to be great reading. One book that I thoroughly enjoyed, I read it so often, every so often, is the book from Robert Cialdini when it comes to persuasion. Now, it's not necessarily a business acumen book per se. It's not under that category, but the things that you learn in there are psychology based. And when we're dealing with people in generally, anything psychology is going to give you a leg up on how to work with people. Now, persuasion is going to go across your entire domain anyway when it comes to your career. So learning how to properly communicate with people to basically get them what they want, but at the same time get what you want, is going to be crucial. So that would be a great book to read. And then one of them, this is a little bit more of a novel, but I think a lot of people that are breaking into tech are really going to appreciate this, or even them that have some experience. It's called The Phoenix Project. Now, this is an interesting book because it's based on a perspective of a IT manager that now got thrown into a position where they'll have to work through, as a leadership position, through all the different departments, operations, DevOps, IT, and also business management. But it's written in a story like, so reading it is gonna go by so quickly, but you're also gonna see the struggles that this person went through. So when it comes to business acumen, you're gonna see how they actually tackle talking to the CEO of the company, seeing the ups and downs of it. How does that impact now them having to be the leader and going to another actual department and trying to bolster them up, figuring out what happened there, how can we improve this? Oh, okay, Charlene over there, she has this problem. Let me help her with this, see how I can draw her in because I need to build my team. So the Phoenix Project is fantastic. It's an easy read. It's going to be enjoyable, and it should help you at least get a better understanding of how these different departments actually interoperate within a business. So just off the top of my head, there's another book. I don't know if you remember, Mike. It was about why do executives, was it Talk Like Idiots or something like that? Do you remember?
Why Business People Speak Like Idiots. One of the best books. I'm seeing if I have it on the counter right now, because I usually pull it out to show it to my students. A good friend of mine, an executive coach, sent it to me about 20 years ago. I can still remember it. I was fresh out of my MBA program. I was in my first executive architect role. And, by the time I was done with every business level piece of jargon you can imagine in this presentation, because when I was in this role at Cisco, I was asked to lead a business council of CIOs to find out what they wanted in the next generation of healthcare products, because they were healthcare CIOs. And when I started babbling in jargon, they all looked like this. And it was my first, presentation of its kind. And I was thinking, uh-oh. So I asked my friend who happened to be in the room in the audience. She was my mentor and an executive coach, and she's wonderful. And I said, how do you think I did today? And she said, can I send you a book? And the book was called Why Business People Speak Like Idiots. And it talks about how to simplify your communication to make it more understandable, not to use jargon, not to use any of that stuff to sound like, the techie in the room. What a difference it made for my career. So I recommend Why Business People Speak Like Idiots to everyone. Great idea, Mark. I forgot that one.
Yeah. And by the way, I love this question that you've posed because it shows that you're on the right track when it comes to anything architecture related. Because I know for myself, Mike can tell his story if you like. It's not like that I didn't know, but I just wasn't applying it all the time. So I've noticed that I would let the engineering side of me come out, and I started communicating a little bit more loosely with the jargoning. And I vividly remember the customer just stopping me and be like, oh, what the heck did you just say? Speak English. That's what they told me. And it's funny because I speak more than English. So, I didn't want to be a jerk and be like, what language do you want me to speak in? Serbo Croatian? You want me to speak in German? Which language do you want me to speak in? Exactly. But in any case, right, you don't find yourself in a position where you have to be told by a customer or a client, listen, you need to speak basically common everyday language. then I can understand a lot of stuff when you talk routing protocols, serverless, compute, or even worse when you start throwing up proprietary marketing jargons like EC2 or stuff like that, or S3 storage that you're like, what does that mean? I only know it's S3 storage because of the S. But again, like Mike mentioned, that book is going to be fantastic. And keep up that mindset. See how you can simplify it, and just remember that depending on who you speak to, that's the words you're going to be using. If you speak to somebody who's not an executive, let's say they're very good with applications or databases, networking, security, you want to learn how to speak their language. If your goal is, of course, to become an architect. And it doesn't matter if it's enterprise, security, networking, cloud, so forth, Gen AI architect, you're going to have to learn these skills on how to be able to translate technical jargon into everyday common words. Because Mike knows this as well as I do. There's no shortage of acronyms when it comes to tech. And the one thing that I've learned with acronyms, they mean different things just across the tech domains. Just across the tech domains. And then they mean something completely different in everyday life. So learn how to, if you can, not use the acronyms when you're talking to certain people. And, you know, I hope the book suggestion that we gave you is going to be of some benefit to you. Great question, though.
Great question.
Next question from Cam. They're wondering, are there any open source projects or volunteer opportunities that can provide practical experience?
So Cam, I want you to understand the nature of the architect and why I had to create the Cloud Architect program. First, I interviewed 1,000 AWS certified people and gave them basic architecture questions, and none of them could answer it. But here's the thing. Architecture is about evaluating someone's business, learning their proprietary business processes, learning their proprietary financial information, learning proprietary challenges to their business, and then evaluating the technology they have and designing a technology strategy for them. I work with businesses that will lose $1 million per minute of downtime. And there's no way that I could have someone that has no knowledge or has never worked before or has limited knowledge volunteer to design my business where I'm going to lose $1 million a minute if it doesn't work. So you also have to understand, and this is why I created an internship for every student that comes to me gets an internship, that in order to really design an architecture, you can't design the same architecture for Amazon Prime and Netflix. Even if they're both on AWS, they're very different. Netflix recommendation engine is very different. It's very accurate. It's very different than Amazon's. And the recommendation engines need to be different because Netflix business operates differently than Amazon's business. So everything, the algorithms, the way it's designed, the way the architecture needs to support different business goals. So now you've got to go in there and be able to speak to the C-suite, whose time on average is worth $10,000 to $15,000 an average, an hour. So now you're going to be taking C-suite time. So if you need to take that time, now they're going to have to give you about $50,000 a time for you to get the information you need from the C-suite. Then they're going to have to dedicate a $300,000 architect to sit beside you and help coach you. Why would a business do that? I mean, I wish they would, but they just don't do that. There are no entry-level jobs, and yet you can get jobs with no experience. I'm going to say this again. Anyone can get any job they want with no experience, but there are no entry-level jobs. So whatever you apply for, don't be entry-level. Don't get a CompTIA A+. Don't get a CompTIA Net+. Get a CCNP. It's some of the knowledge you'll actually need, and it will make you stand out. Don't get a Security Plus, get a CISSP and CISP level knowledge. But any of you can get any job you want. Lenny Burnett was our video editor before we trained him and got a job as a solution architect at Arrow Electronics. Jordan Kitko, a really nice kid, got hired by AWS. He was a college student when he came to us. Belwinder Kerr was a stay-at-home mom. We trained her and she got hired at Microsoft as a cloud solutions architect. Jennifer Emo was a mental health tech before JP Morgan Chase hired her as a solution architect. Pierre Dassault was working on sailboats before he got hired at LeaseWeb. Vladimir was a 24-year-old college student before his first architecture job. Delroy Batt was working on ambulances and EMT before our first architect job. Wallace Agana got hired at Deloitte as a senior solution architect as his first job after we trained him. And before that, he was a sales rep. I mean, Well, I don't want to use him as an example. Noah Parker was a social worker before we got him hired at Ahead. But then again, we've also worked with people like Harsha, who was a rock star, superstar cloud engineer with 10 years of experience. And it took just as much time to go from engineering to an architect because it's a different career. Kind of like if you've been a nurse for 10 years, it doesn't make you need less time to go become a physician. You still have to go to the same medical school because the job's different. You'll have very beneficial knowledge, I promise you. But, it's a different skill. So sadly, that's why I created the Cloud Architect Career Development Program, where people could design systems, present to executives, talk to business people. It's why I have 3 MBAs on teaching the business skills. It's why I have 2 PhD business school professors. So I've got application architects because, I'm a cloud architect. It's why I've got network architects. I've got 3 CCIEs, for example, Mark, Mo, me, Benedict's a CCNP and a rock star. It's why I have people that are enterprise architects and everybody, because it just takes that much to create an architecture program. But I'll tell you this, Cam, I know you can learn it. I am sure you can. And if you don't have these opportunities, you're going to have to find ways to piecemeal your education. A presentation skills class here, a leadership skills class here. I mean, I didn't have access to a program. That's what I did. Went and got 2 MBAs, went and took these training, went and became a CCIE, went and took Cisco certified design training, which was different than the networking training. And they have a different track even, the CCDE. There's no labs for the CCDE. That's the design expert. The CCIE, boy, it's got a lab, and boy, that's a miserable lab, I can tell you. Mark could tell you that's one of the most miserable experiences of his life, but we learned a lot along the way.
Well, I would say probably the journey. Probably the journey was more miserable than the lab itself.
Yeah, it was the journey.
But I get exactly
16-hour days for a year. 6 months to a year.
Yeah. I mean, and this for everybody. Eventually, we'll have a little Heads in the Cloud on it to give you guys our experience from different perspectives, mine, Mike, and Mo's as well, hopefully, so that you guys can get a little bit of understanding of what it entailed and why we endearingly say it was a miserable experience, because it's kind of like a love and hate. But anyway, I digress. That's going to be a different conversation. I did want to add something to what you were saying, Mike. When it comes to any type of projects, when it comes to architecture, it's very difficult because architecture really becomes very important. And this is a little bit sad, but it's a reality. Once you get into the multi-million-dollar projects, right, or the companies that have that, a lot of the what you call like small businesses, they're not going to hire really on anyone that does design work or anything. They're going to meal piece it, just put it together. But what I would suggest you do, Cam, is start off small, but you'll have to create these volunteers opportunity. You may have to go basically door to door, introduce yourself. Again, this is going to be important, how you present yourself, what you're looking to do for them, and see if perhaps you can help them just to design their local area network. Start off with something simple, then see if they have eventually a need maybe to do some type of cloud bursting, right? If they want to scale up into the cloud, maybe then you can do a little project like that. But these projects are not going to be solely architecture based, right? You're going to have to do the implementation and the deployment. So just keep that in mind. Aside from that, just because we've looked everywhere, our program, of course, we got our projects there when it comes to the actual, and it's a team project, so you're not doing it yourself. So you're learning the actual, how do I work with team members together? Somebody takes the lead, somebody presents, right? The other one actually might be more networking focused. The other one, security, applications, database, and so forth. So in our program, it's a little bit more organized for you to be able to accomplish that. Aside from this, the only other thing I can recommend, and this is not necessarily an open project or volunteer opportunity, is read, unfortunately, vendor use cases. And the reason I say that is vendors love to say when they solve their company's problem, especially when it's like, we saved them millions or billions of dollars. Read what the problem statement was, because that's generally what you're going to get anyway when you talk to a customer. You're going to hear their problems. What are my problems? And what am I trying to eventually accomplish once I solve those problems? You'll get that by these use cases. And what you could try to do is dissect it. You know, what is it that they mentioned? What was the financial impact of this? What were they losing financially maybe? Or how did this impact them with the efficiency on their networking side or on the application? Let's say they had a problem with an application, but they were able to, migrate it over and become cloud native. How does that impact their business? So those are little things you can do, but it's going to depend widely on you and also the knowledge that you have. Those use cases are not going to teach you the underlying technology, but rather how the technology was applied potentially.
Yeah.
So that's something you can do, but again, it's not an open source project. It's not a volunteer opportunity, but something where you can learn a little bit more when it comes to business, technology, and the marriage of it.
And actually, you know, thinking about it, you could actually find opportunities to give presentations because that is practical experience. I will tell you that most of us present every single day. And a lot of our jobs is sales. And here's the reason why sales is so important. You know, there's no architecture you design yourself. It takes me 15 to 50 architects to build something. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So there is that. So the next thing that I would say is we needed to find people. We need to sell the design to the customer. Let's say we design an architecture and the customer doesn't buy it. Nothing happens, just PowerPoint where. We need to sell the vision. We need to sell our company to give us resources. There's so much sales in our job. So if you had the opportunity to work in sales somewhere along the line, I will tell you that salespeople have become the easiest people that I've ever trained to get hired. Medical people, very easy to make cloud architects. Salespeople, extremely easy to make cloud architects. Anybody in a management perspective, because honestly, the tech is easier to learn than the business. Anybody can learn anything, but when I've got a business person and they understand the business, now it's just here's your technical solutions and here's how you apply them. It's very easy. When I've got people that have been focused on the tech their entire life, they are advantaged when it comes to the tech, undoubtedly. But if your whole life you've been spent focusing on the tech, now you got to unlearn focusing on the tech and now focusing on the business. And that is not easy. I can tell you, Mark has experienced it when he transitioned from engineer to architect. Mm-hmm. I felt it when I went from engineer to architect. It's kind of like all day long I'm speaking in Greek and they say, Mike, I need you to give a presentation in English or vice versa. You know, when I get back from Greece, you know, when I first come back and after I visit my family for a month, when I come back, I start speaking to people in Greek and forget that they're not Greek. And when I go to Greece for the first time, sometimes I accidentally speak in English until I realize, wait a second, that's not going to work. And I switch to Greek. So it's those kind of things. So great question, Cam. Please feel free to ask more.
Wonderful. All right, let's proceed. Next question is from Carlos Escalante. For the past 10 years, I've worked as a front-end engineer. I want to transition to an architect role in the near future. What would be best for me? Cloud architect or Gen AI architect?
Carlos, what do you want to do? That's what's best for you. Do you want to become a physician? Do you want to become an attorney? You can do both. Your past, and I know a lot of people really think it limits them, but it has no bearing on your future. In my youth, I practiced internal medicine. I'm a nurse practitioner. 6 months later, actually 9 months later, I'm a Cisco certified internet expert and the lead architect on Wall Street of a company on Wall Street, the largest market maker on the NASDAQ. What do you want to do? If you want to focus more on the bigger architecture, the compute, the storage, the security, the AI, the everything, you're a cloud architect. If you want to be a specialist and just focus on the AI, you're an AI architect. I will tell you, if we look at supply and demand curves, which you should always look at as it pertains to your career, in the short term, there's an extreme shortage of cloud architects and AI architects. So getting hired in one of these jobs, generally speaking, if you're properly trained, is not an issue. And they both have good opportunities. I know a lot of $500,000 or more cloud architects, but there's also a whole lot more $500,000 a year or more AI architects, because huge demand. Every company is saying, how do we use this AI? We can't figure out how to use it. The AI architect is going to be the person that figures out how to use it and creates the design. So it's not like you're taught in the certification, here's your tech, trust me, just go use it. And then it won't work. So huge demand for the AI architect. So I'd say right now, for the short term, next 5 years, you're going to have more opportunity in the AI architect, but and higher salaries. And we've got a great AI program with David Lithicum. But I also tell you want to be a cloud architect, there is huge demand. Because first, the cloud architects need to fix the mistakes. 70% of cloud architectures were disasters. So it's an opportunity for us cloud architects to go figure it out, and organizations are hiring architects to go fix the mistakes they did. This single mistake stuff, all this lift and shift stuff, this single cloud stuff, which they're all dumping and going to multi-cloud. 98% of organizations have. So all the fixing this, taking all the stuff that shouldn't have been on the cloud and building private clouds for better, faster, cheaper performance, that's occurring. So huge opportunity in both. But what do you want to do more?
Exactly. What is it that you want to do? The thing that I can tell is based on the front end engineer that you are going to have very, very good experience when it comes to the user experience that you've had to create for your customers, right? So that's something that you can translate. When it comes to cloud architects or GenAI architects, I say it depends. And I mean that aside from what just you want to do, but it depends on who you take training from. For example, the training that we give when it comes to GenAI architects is also part of the training from the Cloud Architect Development program that we have.
The architect piece.
Yep, the architect piece. And the reason is, and I would give you the networking equivalent, maybe we'll do this another time, but when you look at the GenAI is going to run on top of something, right? So it is not a underlying technology. It's basically an overlay technology. So you need to figure out, if I want to become a GenAI architect, on which kind of platform is that architecture going to run, the generative AI. And it's going to be either a rented or virtualized data center, which we know as a cloud service environment. So there's going to be your Amazons, your Azure, and your Oracle, and so forth. Or it's going to be a private data center. So the way we teach it is that you're getting that data center and cloud experience, that understanding, and then you can focus on the actual generative AI. So that's kind of like how we tackle it. If you take, let's say, training somewhere else, then you have to figure out, okay, if I'm doing Gen AI, what else do I need to know now? Because they might not include that training, right? But just know you can do cloud architecture without Gen AI. Gen AI, though, I would say definitely requires some type of infrastructure knowledge, because you're going to have to run those large language models on storage area networks, on compute services, and so forth, right? There's going to be a network. So that's what I would caution from. If you're going to go Gen AI, get training from somebody who's also going to teach you the underlying foundational knowledge, the IT knowledge, so that you can actually understand how you're going to be running the Gen AI architecture.
Yeah, because sometimes it'll be right on the cloud. Sometimes it'll be best in the data center. A lot of times it'll be best in the data center. Should it be in both? How are you going to manage the data? How's the data going to be hygiene? How are the model going to be trained? You know, what type of model should be selected? This is architecture. The engineering is going to be the more like the engineer is the way someone would write code. That's the engineering, the role of the AI engineer. The architect is really focused on the design of these systems.
I would say you can't go wrong with either, but definitely you can do cloud architecture without Gen AI. But if you're going to do Gen AI, you're definitely going to need training on cloud services or data center services, because that's why they run out.
Both.
I doubt Microsoft is running it from their home, so
they're not.
Yeah, and you'll notice also there's a trend, right? Because of the way Gen AI has exploded, you see a lot of these service providers. That's literally what they are. It doesn't matter if it's an internet service provider, cloud service provider, wide area network service provider. They're all service providers, right? They sell you some type of service. They're building data centers like no tomorrow. That's what they're trying to do, right? Right now, they are building it out in the United States. They're already planning for India and other countries as well, right? Because they want to bring up their infrastructure as well. So you can't go wrong learning the data center and then the virtualized data center equivalent, which is going to be your cloud services. And then on top of that, do Gen AI.
Both great careers.
Next question from a LinkedIn user. How to focus on getting skills to become a cloud security architect? Is PMP good certification to have as well?
So LinkedIn user, if you want to be a project manager, a project management certification would be good for you. If you want to be a doctor, a medical degree would be good for you. So please don't get a certification in someone else's career. It will make them think of you as a project manager, not an architect or a cloud security architect. So how do you focus on the skills? You have to understand what the security architect does. The security architect determines the organizational risk. They evaluate the assets, they evaluate the risk of the assets being compromised, and they determine what the annual loss expectancy type is. What is that organization's risks each year? And then they work with that organization to design a security architecture that will cost less than the risks actually are, that will provide the necessary security requirements. And that first business calculation will include the quantifiable risks, like the cost of a security breach, for example, but they will also include the non-quantifiable risks and trying to quantify that in some way, shape, or form, such as brand damage, loss of trust. Then the architect will, once they know what they're working with, they'll work with that organization to see what's the best way to mitigate that risk. Maybe it's to transfer it to an insurance company. Maybe it is a new security architecture, and it will also include a security policy. So the architect will need to know how to design the security policy. What kind of physical security is going to be needed for the organization's perimeters? How will users sign into the systems? What type of authentication do they need at the office? Do they use an eye scan, a fingerprint, a badge plus a password, what have you? How are the systems locked up that hold the security? You know, and the same thing is going to go on. What kind of data, where's the data going to be secured? How is the data stored? How is the data encrypted? Is it encrypted when it's stored, in flight, at rest, that kind of thing? They will have to architect, you know, the authentication systems like the IAM systems, like Microsoft Active Directory, and how that's going to integrate and federate into the entire environments. Although that could be done by an IAM architect. They'll be responsible for designing the demilitarized zones for each and every remote access thing that needs to occur. They'll be responsible for designing the security architectures in between the clouds that are going to need to occur. They're going to be needing to design, you know, security of everything. Whether they're designing zero trust, which is going to be part of it, whether they design defense in depth, which is going to be part of it. Then they'll be involved in determining the training that the organization needs to use. Then they'll be determining the types of endpoint protection the systems need to be used. You know, what do you do? What services get disabled on the operating system? What's patching? How's it going to, what kind of malware, what kind of endpoint protection, and what have you? They'll be designing the firewall infrastructure. They'll be designing the monitoring system. So they're going to be designing that. So how do you get those skills? Well, there's two ways you can do it. The most efficient way is to have somebody that's skilled teach you. Because a good security architect earns about $1,000 a day. And if you try to figure it out on your own and it takes you 2 to 3 years to get there, chances are you lost about $600,000 or $700,000 while you're trying to figure it out. Try to find somebody good and maybe they can get you there in a year, 8 months to a year, and you actually get there versus getting tired trying to figure it out on your own and not even knowing what you don't know. But if you didn't know, you first have to understand that you're going to need your business skills, and then you're going to need your technical skills. I can tell you that you will get some of the skills by taking the CISSP certification, some of the skills by doing the CCSP certification, and some of the skills with the CISM. I'm going to tell you that's going to give you 30% of the tech, which in world of architecture world, doing 3 certifications and getting those skills is huge. For example, an AWS Solutions Architect Professional, I think gives you 3% of the skills of a cloud architect. Or less. It might actually bias you, but I'd say 3% of the skills. But these 3 will give you 30%. Then, if you have those specific things and you know what those 3 things are, then if you take these 3 certifications and when you go down the things in the CISSP and they talk about data loss prevention, and maybe if you read the official book they create, or you take you notice that they talk about it for 10 pages, go learn 200-300 pages about data loss prevention. Then when they talk about hashing algorithms, don't just use the 15 or 20 or 30 pages of content in the CISSP. Go find the real heavy-duty deep depth and go read a couple hundred pages on that. And if you do that, now you're going to have the underlying technology knowledge and you're going to understand it and well. Now you just need somebody to teach you how to do the design, because right now you know what each individual component is, but not how to put the pieces together. And then you will have very good technical architecture skills. So beyond that, you will still need the leadership skills because you're going to have to lead large teams for these designs and investigations. You will need the presentation skills. You go start giving presentations, getting good feedback on them. You will need to know how to sell. You will need to really know how to command a room and talk to executives and create budget in the executives and help manipulate the RFIs, RFPs, RFQs in your favor. And when you get these skills, I got to tell you, you will become great. So why don't you join us on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar on Thursday? I will cover every one of those skills. If you want to train with us, we'd love to train you. Want to train somewhere else and go get a business school and then go to executive skill training somewhere else? I'm happy. I just want you to have a great career LinkedIn user, and I want you to love what you do. Any one day that you have a job that you don't enjoy is one day too many, and I don't care what they pay you for it. I've had jobs that paid me more money than I could ever spend, and I walked out the door in a week, and I was like, you know what? It just doesn't matter. It's not making life not worth living. And I've had jobs that paid me very little that I loved, and I stayed there a lot longer than I needed to because I was happy.
Mike, I have this question for you because I know you and I, we've of course discussed it, but again, these are private conversations. You mentioned a few resources from the CISSP, then the cloud security, and as well as the, what is it, Certified Information Management Security, I believe, right? The CISM?
Yeah, security management.
Yeah. Can you let the audience know a little bit more why you specifically mentioned something like the CISSP compared to maybe a specific resource such as AWS Security or Azure Security? Why specifically those resources?
And, you know, I can definitely say this. So I have created certification training material for the CISSP, the CISM, as well as the CCSP. I also created certification material that I was going to give away completely free. And I may give away some of these certifications completely free too. So subscribe and hit the bell to be notified, because we'll probably do at least one free good big certification on our YouTube channel. The rest will probably go to our students. But when I actually produced the AWS Security Advanced certification, there was no security in it. I mean, I did it, and as I'm going through it, I felt guilty even teaching it to someone, because all it really was names of AWS services, which in most cases I wouldn't use because there's better and more industrial tools that I could use in an enterprise environment. So here's what I do whenever I create tech content. I give it to Mark, and I say, Mark, check it. And why do I do that? Because Mark is a technology peer. He is superstar when it comes to tech, and I want to make sure it's right. Because when you create content, and as much as I do, you need to check it. Everybody needs to check it, and Mark would send it to me. And when you're an architect, you're going to have other architects verify your work too. So it's just the way I do things. When Mark got, the 700 slides that I made for this AWS certification, he actually asked me, "Do you really think we should teach this? Should we take people's time and teach them something that isn't going to provide value for them?" And I said, "No, we're there." So the point is I have no problem with you doing the AWS Advanced Security. It's a cake certification. It's really no big deal. And if you do the CISSP and then you do the AWS certification, awesome. Because everybody's going to see the CISSP and the AWS certification. It's like, oh, great. Now he knows how to do the stuff that he learned in the CISSP on the AWS cloud. So that's good. But just don't count on any AWS certification on its own being enough. It is meant to be all of their certifications, technician certifications. Here's how you do the stuff on our program, but we're not going to teach you how the stuff works. Technician, and that's fine. We need admins. We need technicians. It's in a very important role, but it's not an architect role.
Yeah, and it's funny when we discuss the CISSP and then the AWS security. And again, I'm not just picking on AWS security for the sake of picking on it. I mentioned previously that they do expect you to come into those type of certifications with a specific type of knowledge, right? So they expect that. They're not going to teach you some of the fundamentals. So what we found as we went through these other programs, that they really teach you the fundamentals, but they integrate them in regards to how does this actually somewhat get deployed without the actual configuration detail, and then how does that impact the business too. So that's what we found so great about this type of material when it comes to CISSP, the CISM, and as well as I keep forgetting the other one. I think it's the CCSP, right? Certified Cloud Security.
That's like a nice intro level to cloud security.
Yeah.
Real good intro level. Very nice. It's a very nice intro.
Yeah, you'll get more out of something like that than specifically just tackling the AWS sort of documentation or so forth, because it teaches you the why behind the things, so that when you go to do the actual vendor specific security, and again, cloud security is great for what they need to do. Remember, this is a shared basically environment. They have to account for a lot, so they're doing a really, really good job when it comes to that. But when it comes to the actual underlying training of the technology, they don't really train you on that. And a lot of the stuff is also going to be proprietary, which makes sense because they know how their infrastructure is built out, how their system, their architecture is, and how to protect that architecture. And then some of that, like Mike mentioned, is going to be user responsibility, right? They're going to have to keep it open enough for you to be able to do what you want to do for your business, but you also need to know how to secure that. They're not necessarily going to teach you that. Will they provide you some tools for that? Sure. But if you don't even understand the basics to begin with, what good does the tool do to you, right? It makes no difference to you there. So I hope that answers your question, but that's why specifically I wanted you to tell Mike, the students, the audience, why specifically from ISC, the resources compared to the actual vendors themselves. Right. Let's go on to the next question. From UCOL, what tools do I need and how can I learn architectural designs for IT?
Okay, UCOL, there's two actual questions. Knowing how to draw the picture is nothing. Knowing what the organization actually needs and what's going to solve their business problems and I'll give you answers for both. And the way the pieces and parts need to fit together is the real issue. How you draw them is immaterial. Personally, I use Microsoft PowerPoint, or I draw it by hand. I take a picture of it and I send it to a graphic artist and ask him to do it in Adobe InDesign and make it look good. And if you look at like the Microsoft architectural documents that you see on their website, they are done in Adobe InDesign, and the architecture that I do, I use that. Now, there are other tools. There used to be Microsoft Visio that we all used to use to draw our diagrams. It's a very simple CAD program. There's Lucidchart, which is used widely. It's a browser-based thing. It's drag and drop. It's iPad simple. It's very easy to use. And there's another one called Draw.io. I'm telling you right now, and the reason I say this is the easy part, within 4 to 6 hours of just playing with one, you'll know what to do. It's that easy. You can watch a YouTube video, not an architect skill, something you just know how to do, something you'll learn. It's really there. Now, how to learn architectural designs is you're going to need somebody to train you for it. And you're going to have to be very careful in your training that you're learning architecture, not engineering. I saw the two most terrifying things. Someone that's never been an architect in his life has an AI architecture course, and he's teaching Python coding, R coding, and he's teaching all this hands-on engineering. And then when the person's going to ask him, tell me about your data hygiene practices that are necessary. Tell me what considerations I should have when they have a model. Could you tell me how are we going to train the model, the type of data, the clean the data? Tell me about the antagonistic systems in there. They're not going to be able to answer it. They're only going to know how to configure it, which is not anything to do with what architects do. They're not going to know how to solve the business problems, what use cases to use, how to tune it. They're not going to get any of that by learning how to build it. They'll learn how to build it. So you're going to need someone to teach you how to design. So why do I say this, UCOL? So we basically have two kinds of careers in technology. There's a couple, but in the tech side, we have planning careers and we have building careers. The chief information officer is a planner. The chief technology officer is a planner. An AI architect is a planner. A cloud architect is a planner. An enterprise architect is a planner. We're strategy people. We basically do the same thing as management consultants. And you know what happened when I was a management consultant? They called me a business architect. And really what we were doing, whether I was a business architect, an enterprise architect, a cloud architect, or a network architect, is I was designing systems to optimize the organization's business. I had to focus on the people, the processes, and technology. So planning careers are also medicine. You go to the doctor, they build a plan, they ask you some questions, they make a diagnosis, they give you a prescription, that's the plan, and they send you home. Or they send you to somebody else to do something for you, like physical therapy, because you hurt your back. They're not doing the physical therapy. They sent you there. That's a planning career. People don't natively know how to plan. So they need to be taught how to plan. Now, building careers. I know people that can literally put walls up in their house because they Googled it and figured it out. Watched a YouTube video. That you can do. You can learn how to. Learn how to play with Linux by playing with it, and playing with it. Again, you can learn that. You can learn how to write a Terraform script, and if it doesn't execute, you're fine. That's building. You can learn how to build. You can learn systems administration. You can almost learn cloud engineering on your own. But you can't learn how to design systems because you don't know where to begin. You need to be taught the process. How do you get the right information? How do you relate to people? How do you get the information from people that they don't want to give you that you need to know? How does the business operate? How do you tune that business without breaking it? Somebody needs to teach you those things. So here's the good news, UCOL. All these planning careers, did you ever notice that a physician, an attorney, and an architect seem to earn a lot of money? Because you can't learn them on your own. It takes time and effort, and somebody has to teach you these things. And that's why they pay 10 times more, because huge demand, no supply, because virtually everybody else is afraid to go take the training or do the training. That's why. So that's the good news. It'll put you in the top 1% by going and doing these things. And I promise you, QCUL, it'll be great. Just make sure wherever you train, they're teaching you for architecture, not engineering, because 99% of the world teaches engineering when they say call it architecture. And I typically have to retrain people. I retrain graduates from people's cloud computing master's degree every day, from people's, I'll teach you SysOps, DevOps, and architecture all in the same boot camp, which is like, here, be a doctor, a nurse, and an airplane pilot in the same 4-year degree. It's ridiculous. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Great questions.
Yeah, and you want to keep in mind as well that depending on which environment you're in, the architecture will vary, right? So, for example, if you're going to work in the cloud, you can learn some fundamental architecture design. You know, we teach you many times the design mindset that you need to have that makes you successful across all types of design. It doesn't matter if it's cloud, if it's infrastructure design, if it's application, that all helps you. But then there's specific ones. When you go in the cloud, AWS has a very specific way of the way they want you to architect. You know, they have, I think it's called the architect framework or something like that they have. They specifically outline a successful architecture based on their cloud service environment. Microsoft has something equivalent to that, such do Oracle, such do Google, and that translates also into other domains. When it comes to networking, each networking vendor has also their specific architecture when it comes to their specific operating system or the network operating system, how it should be deployed, how it should be designed. You might get some very specific environment architectures. If you think about it, how let's say a network is going to be built out in an enterprise compared into a data center, the needs are different when it both comes to scalability, resilience, and redundancies. So you can kind of dive into those specific architectures, but just know that it's going to very much depend on the environment you're in. So in our training, we do specifically touch on network, security, cloud, but more specifically, we try to focus on the actual fundamentals of architecture and design work, because that's going to be universal, irregardless of what you're going to be tackling. So just know you can get very specific with it, just like with your career, right? You can train to be a generalist, and then eventually you decide, I really enjoy security. I want to dive down security. So you could be a cloud architect, but in extension, a cloud security architect. So again, the world is your oyster. You have so many choices. Find something that you enjoy, stick with it, and you're going to be fantastic at it. The next question from Isiam Harp. I got my first cloud job after CLF and SAA as a cloud FinOps analyst. Any advice, please?
SM.
Oh, hold on a second. There's a little bit more. It says, what advice can you give to excel in this role? Should my focus be understanding more the technical side, or is it more towards finance? I've not started yet and currently doing some research. Thank you.
So Isam, what a great question. What is FinOps? It's to optimize the processes and the utilization of the cloud to optimize its costs. and make sure the systems do what they do in an important manner. So it's business. This whole discipline of FinOps honestly didn't need to occur. And I'll tell you what I mean. And we desperately need FinOps now. So you picked a good place. So here's the thing. If the people understood architecture before they took clients to the cloud, they would have known that most of the cases didn't make sense. Look, I love cloud computing, and cloud computing makes sense. Here's an example. When we started our company, I wanted to have an OpenStack cloud that our students could use, that we could have. And I wanted about 240 cores, and I wanted at least about 1.5 terabytes of RAM to make this happen. So I looked at AWS, and it was about $11,000 a month. But it also didn't allow nested virtualization, so I would have had to do something different, which would have dragged my costs up even higher. But let's just assume it was only $11,000 a month. I looked at the servers that I could have used, which were the iSeries servers that AWS have. They call them an i-3. They use the Xeon E526 XXV3 processors. I looked at them and said they would work. And each one of them was a little over $1,100 a month to rent, basically speaking, with a little bit of storage. I then saw that the servers were $900 to buy them. Now they're $400 to buy them. And AWS is still charging $1,000 a month for them. So I said, look, for my use case for a student lab, I can spend basically $10,000 one time versus $11,000 on AWS every single month. And I went, all right, well, it's only going to cost me, AWS over 3 years will cost me about $400,000, or I can spend, $11,000 right now. I spent $10,000, $11,000, and I haven't had to pay a bill for the last several years. Maybe I paid $2,000 of electric in the last 2 years, but all right, that's it. For my use case, it didn't make sense. If the architect that brought the systems to the cloud actually said, okay, this one needs to go to the cloud, should be retooled for the cloud. This one should stay for the data center. This thing runs all the time. It needs to be in the data center. This thing runs sporadically and event-driven. And I would have sent that to the cloud. It would have been a beautiful architecture. Companies would have gotten speed, agility, and it would have been magical. But a lot of the architects in the beginning didn't know architectures. They didn't know anybody that knew cloud. They hired a bunch of certified people that didn't know cloud. They knew how to build stuff in the cloud. They engineered these systems versus architected them, and now we have a financial mess and a whole lot of technical debt too, which is even worse. So that's FinOps. So you'll be better off by learning more business. The better your business acumen is, the better your presentation skills are, the better your leadership skills. You'll be moving more out of these analyst roles and move into much more manager roles, and then move into more strategic advisor roles, which is where the money is always in planning and advice. I wish it wasn't the case. When I was younger, I was given this information, and I was a paramedic for years. I did internal medicine after that as a nurse practitioner a few years, but I had a coach in college, and they said, Mike, you love to do stuff with your hands, but you're not real good at doing stuff with your hands. When you do stuff with your mind, Mike, you're really great. He said, here's the thing. You get paid a whole lot more to do stuff with your mind than you do with your hands. And since you're bad at using your hands for stuff and you're great at using your mind, Mike, seriously, I recommend you using your mind. But that's what he said to me. But here's the thing. The more you get to the planning, the more you get to the interpretation, the more you get to the finance, the greater you will earn. And it is by a big factor. So that's what I would do, assuming you like the business side. But if you love the tech and that's going to make you happy inside, then I would do the tech. But I would really focus on the business if I was looking for career optimization.
Yeah, so he does mention here in another comment that he does have a background in aerospace engineering, right? So I will put it this way. I agree with Mike in that sense that you can never go wrong learning more about the business, even from an engineering side. And the reason I say that is when it comes to technology, there never is an end to how much you can learn. There's always more, right? And number one, I don't know about you, but I can't read a 1,000-page book and remember every word. I wish I could. I wish I was like Mike's wife. She can literally do that. I'm jealous of that, but I can't do that. I might remember half the book. So, but in that case, I would still tell you is focus a little bit more on the business, because it sounds like you got a pretty good background when it comes to actual technology. So the way I would look at it, even if you stick with the engineering side, is how can I improve my actual deployments and the operation and the maintenance of already technologies in place? And to be able to do that, It's more than simply practicing and making sure everything runs right. You have your monitoring in and out, but it's going to be about how does the business utilize this technology? If I can figure out better how the business utilize the technology, I can actually engineer it so much better, right? I can be more efficient at it. A very simple example is, since you mentioned you're working on the cloud, look at the applications that a financial institution might be running on the back end. Now, we're going to put compliances and all that jazz aside, right? Let's just strictly talk about applications. Let's say they're running an application in their data center right now. Where you can come in is, how do we make this application our cloud native? That's where you can come in, understanding the business processes and how to accomplish that, and then being actually able to implement it and engineer it in a manner that's actually going to be efficient for the business and that's going to be wasting a bunch of money, right? Because that's also going to be part of your FinOps type of job, is being able to make sure that the cost doesn't go out of whack. It is going to stay within the margins that the company has defined. So that's where you can go in with that knowledge of understanding the business more. When it comes to an engineering role, it's going to depend on what financial institution you're going to be working on. Just learning more coding is not going to do you good if, let's say, that particular financial institution doesn't use the programming language that you're learning. What good is learning C++ if they're using Python, right? So you got to keep that in mind. And that's why we said the best and the most neutral ground to go after, where you also have the highest upside, is a little bit more about the business, how they want to use it. And then that gives you also the flexibility, right? Remember, you always want to allow yourself a little wiggle room on trying to be able maybe to shift into a different position. And that's what that business acumen will provide you a little bit too. The ability, if you want to go into an architect position, to pivot that way as well. So just keep that flexibility in mind, in case you want to maybe 5-10 years down the road, you got tired of waking up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. At least you allowed yourself the flexibility of being able to move into an architecture role. But fantastic question, Isam. Love it. Question from Cruz Martinez. What is the best way to approach RFCs for deep understanding?
So this is one of my favorites. Before I get to that, just want to let you know we're going to be doing some free AWS Solution Architect Associate training in about 4 weeks, approximately, give or take a few weeks. So sign up now. The link's in the description. My team will pop it in the chat box. We have a How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar on Thursday. It'll be on Zoom. We'll talk about the role, what we do, the skills you need, and of course, you can ask us questions face-to-face. It's free, so sign up. We'll also have a book on how to help you get your first cloud architect job. It'll cover everything you need to know and all the misconceptions, all the things you need to learn, and it's completely free. So go sign up. So how is the best way to approach RFCs for deep understanding? So Cruz, love that question. For those of you that are unfamiliar, the Internet Engineering Task Force RFCs are the standards for everything. Want to know the standard for private addressing? You look it up. It's RFC 1918. Want to know the standards for OSPF? It's there. The standards for DNS, DHCP, they are all there. This is the best source of information. How do I learn the RFCs? I read them. I take notes on them, and I read them again. And sometimes I read it a third time, and after that, I'm there. So I am a big believer in reading the RFCs, because they are the actual specifications. And that kind of is really what I take. But when I read things, here's what I do. If I read something and I don't understand something, I go look it up. So, reading a one document like that might have a couple of things that you may just not understand in the first time. So you go look them up. And when you look them up, where do you get your information? Respectable sources, not somebody's Medium page. Not Fred, Aunt's, Martha's, Joey's, Billy, Bob's, whomever. Not the kid that's in school that has never had a job before in their life. You go to Cisco. You go to Juniper Networks. You go to IBM. You go to Palo Alto Networks, Fortinet. Respectable, or Dell, or respectable organizations. And they will have really good documentation. And then I read. Now, I'm kind of a visual person. So I draw these little notes, which are horribly written because I have medical professional handwriting, but I draw myself these little notes so I can see it, and I take handwritten notes. Wait, Mike said handwritten notes in 2024? Yes, and here's the reason I said handwritten notes. The process of writing handwritten notes activates a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. which is responsible for either what to do in an emergency or deep memories like when you got married. It's that flashbulb kind of memory where you can still remember what your wife looked like 28 years ago in her wedding dress and what your wedding cake tasted like, etc., because it was such an important moment to you, you know, those kind of things. So when you write it down handwritten, it tends to activate the reticular activating system, which commits it to memory, which doesn't when you use the computer. So I do that. And then I build myself notes and maps, and I keep reading it until I get it. And as soon as I get it, here's the test if you understand something. If you truly understand it, you'll be able to explain it simply. So my wife, who knows emergency medicine, internal medicine, and cardiology, I would explain BGP to her and made sure she understood it. When she understood it, I knew I got it. When she understood OSPF, I knew I got it. So that was how I did it. And that's how I learned them.
You used a very specific word, and that is deep understanding. The key word being deep. Okay. So Mike and I, we have a little bit of a similar approach in this. So if his is a little bit different, he'll mention it. But the RFC, irregardless of what most people will tell you, is probably not going to be your first stop of learning a technology. And I only say that is because the people that wrote those, they are true engineers and architects. So I'm going to give you this idea. When you start reading about the finite state machine of BGP and the RFC, there's so much in it that if that was your first stop of trying to understand the finite state machine, I think you genuinely probably would try to find the first bus that you can throw yourself in front of. And I'm not condoning you should do this. I'm just saying that's how it feels, because you're going to look at it and be like, oh my God, there's like, just when I want to move from the active to, or from the idle to the active, or for the active to connect state, there's like 15 different things I got to think about. What's this reconnect try timer? It makes no sense. So this is why Mike's and my approach are very simple. Similar. We would read something. Let's say we're reading about BGP. We will read the page. And then if we need clarification or we're more interested in gaining more understanding about it, that's where you go and you start looking at the RFC or some supplementary information. You're there just to keep adding to your knowledge bank when it comes to that. But always have something that, first of all, builds you up. You always want to think of it. You want to go from the whole to the details, meaning build a framework, first of all, of knowledge. That's going to include reading books first. And if you notice, I didn't say labbing or anything, just reading, right? Read the books first. As you're reading them, write down the questions you have. And then continue with the active learning, go research it. And that's where the RFCs can come in. And what you'll notice is as you switch back and forwards, it will take a little bit more time. But again, we're not trying to rush through learning. We want you to learn, right? Even if it's for certification or some type of exam, you want to learn the information. Then as you do this back and forwards, you'll notice that concepts start becoming clearer, and these RFCs are going to be a lot easier to understand. Now, will you still understand everything? I sure don't. There's some stuff I still read in the RFCs. I'm like, what is this guy trying to tell me? I'm at step 4 and there's like 8, 9, 10 more to go, right? So just keep that in mind. That's how you kind of want to approach it. It's supplementary to reinforce something you've learned or to clarify it. And I think, Mike, you had a similar approach, right? When you were studying for your CCA?
That's exactly what I did. I go, I look at it, I read it. If there's other good documentation, like from Cisco, I read that. Mm-hmm. Then I go back and read the RFC again with that additional information. Does it make more sense? And I keep looking it up until I truly understand it.
Yeah. And you can apply that to any type of learning, right? Because
anything.
Yeah. I give you a simple example. If you were to read, let's say, a Wikipedia article, there's a lot of information in just in a simple Wikipedia article that your brain is not going to know what to focus on. And the way to help your brain focus on that is to do some additional research on the different facets. And that's how it's going to bring the material to life, because it's going to start clarifying things for you. So that, give that a shot. Go back and forth between reading material, write down, as Mike said, actually write it down if you can on a piece of paper, the questions that you have, and very important, why you have them, right? If you know nothing about the subject, don't write that down. I know nothing about it. You need to build up some understanding a little bit more. But once you have it, the question is, what is it that I don't understand here? Why is this confusing to me? Give your brain something, an objective to shoot for that it can resolve, and then go through the RFCs or supplementary information.
Great approach, Mark. Tyrone, if you want to bring in the next one, I'm going to run a little late today. There's a lot of questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
All right. Next question is from Kali Prasad. When does the 50% off discount come again? Does the cloud architecture course have CISSP preparation guides or lectures too?
Okay, so the Cloud Architect program definitely has CISSP training in it. We provide training for the following certifications in there. Most of our training is architect related. I'm going to make it very clear, but we provide training for the CISSP. In fact, we're going through that training right now. We record all classes, so if anybody wants to go back and see the last 4 sessions, they can. We provide training for TOGAF 10. We're a member of the Open Group because that's one of the main architecture frameworks that are used out there. We provide training on the AWS Solutions Architect Professional and the Azure Solutions Architect Expert because we want our people to have one of them. So we do that. Now, I don't know if we'll run a 50% discount or not. We ran a 50% discount for the following reasons. We had a new architect program, the AI architect program, and when we normally do, we do that. But Callie, I would encourage you to think about it this way. The average cloud architect earns $1,000 a day. Average. Average AI architect earns more than that. If you delayed your training hoping that you might save $200 with a bigger coupon by 3 months, your graduation would be 3 months later. And since the average cloud architect earns $20,000 a month, it'll probably cost you $60,000 to save a few $100s. So unless there's some kind of a crazy hardship, I probably would be more focused on getting to my goals and getting to them faster from a financial perspective. Mind you, I did the same thing for my education when I took my CCNP boot camps, which didn't help me, but I thought they were going to. And I did all these things. I spent money early because I knew that, being better skilled now would equate more later. I spent close to $40,000 on my CCIE, and that sounds crazy, but you have to understand my CCNP boot camp, which was a little bit, was $11,000. My MCSC boot camp, which was kind of my thing, was $5,000. Then I did a CCDP boot camp, which was about $8,000 more. Then I had to rent a rack from CC boot camp, which used to be $200 a day every Saturday and Sunday for 9 months straight. Then I had to fly out to California a few times to take some additional training. Then I had to pay for the lab, which was $1,000 20 years ago, pay for hotels to fly to take the lab. Mark, you spent what, $20,000 or maybe a little less on your CCIE?
Yeah, I spend a little less, but there's a whole reason why I spend a lot less than most people. And that definitely has to do with preparation. But let me put it this way. Something that I always did when I took any type of training, and you'll learn this also as you start talking to people where their time is more valuable than the actual finance, right? So I looked at it this way, and you can look at it the same way with the program that we're offering across the board. How much would it cost me to gain the equivalent knowledge offered within a program? So you look at the finances, what it would take me. Now what's going to happen is you're going to have to spend a resource called time, which many people say has no price. It's invaluable, right? It's like there's money. There's a lot of things you can buy with money, but time is not one of them, right? So the way you would have to look at it is you're going to spend time now researching how much is it going to cost me to get all that. Then you're going to figure out, okay, it cost me this much time. It's going to cost me this much actual money, some coin, something, physical, digital, that's I'm going to have to exchange. If I get a program that includes all this already, how much time and money is it going to save me? Now, I can tell you from my personal experience, I've taken training both for non-technical and technical things, and I even wanted to always improve myself. And one of the aspects I always wanted to improve myself was when it comes to presentation, sales, so forth. I always look for additional training. It's just how I'm made up. And I remember I spoke to Mike and I specifically told him, I've done the research. I know books, so it's not like I haven't read any books. But what the program included was so comprehensive. And then you got to think of it, Mike and the other instructors that we have, the years of knowledge that they have. Years. Think about what it took them to get that. It says there is no feasible way of me replicating that in any short amount of time. Even if money was no object, it just wouldn't be. So for me in that case, I've done the math. I sat down, I'm married, so I even discussed it with my wife. And I come to this conclusion. Even though it may cost me, a few $1,000s to get that type of training, it pales in comparison what it will cost me on the other end, both in time and finances. So I highly suggest you do something similar like that. Sit down, again, logical first, right? Sell yourself logically. Is this worth something?
Yeah.
Once you've done that, now you go look at it emotionally. What can this do for me and my family? Will this improve my lot in life? And then decide if that's worth it. I can only tell you for myself what my approach was. I know Mike has a similar approach when it comes to that. And a lot of people that have a lot of finances, they do the same thing. They'll pay a little extra because they save on other ways. Remember, you can always make more money. You can't make more time. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and you always set yourself up. For example, I remember being a kid having absolutely zero money, and I would go take a certification. And it was in Philadelphia, so I could park 3 miles away and save the parking and walk because I was very fit. Or I could just pay the $25 for parking, which was ridiculous, and get there an hour early and be totally relaxed and take the test and have more mentally focused so I could pass the test. So I would do things like that. And yes, I spent a fortune on my CCIE, but I got more than a 6-figure raise out of it as soon as I passed it. So it paid for itself in a couple of months. And after that, I had greater earnings for the rest of my life. So it's all what you want. But the best investment, whether you train with us or train somewhere else, is you. Invest in you. You can go on a dinner or go on a cruise and it's gone. You invest in you and you do something you're passionate about and you excel in it, your life will change forever. And usually in a good way.
Yep. And remember, whatever you're consuming, you got to make sure that it's helping you, because if you're consuming something that's not helping you, helping somebody else. I'm not saying that's incorrect, but if you're, how can I put this? If you're spending 4 or 5 hours watching TV, who are you improving? Are you improving the people that are the actors and the actresses? You definitely are. What are you getting out of it aside entertainment? Again, entertainment is important, but what is it doing for your life if you can barely, pay your bills? So you got to think about that, right? How do you spend your time and how do you spend your resources? That's going to be very important.
Yeah.
Great question. Very, very practical question.
Yeah.
Question from Cam. What are the key soft skills needed for a cloud architect role?
Presentation skills, and that's the last part of a cloud architect interview for most cases, or a solution architect. You'll have to give a presentation. You will have to be able to sell during that presentation. You will have to be able to build a team of people and lead a team of people. You will have to have executive presence. For example, watch. Hi, everybody. This is Mike Gibbs. I'm a cloud architect. That's with no executive presence. Now, with executive presence, people will take you seriously, so you're going to need to have that. CXO relevancy, that's a cross between a business skill and a sales skill, so you're going to have that. You're going to need a lot of emotional intelligence in this role. Look, 70% of your customers have already made a mistake and it's already hurting their business, so kind of keep with that. You're going to have a real soft touch. So they're your main soft skills. And of course, communication skills. Because we may not code, we may not configure, but you will be talking all day, every day. And you'll have to communicate to executives, management, and technology professionals, and you're going to have to be able to translate between them. So there's that. And Cam, do you want to know the real secret? Architect skill is what they referred to it at Cisco, and it is the best description: herding cats. So I have a cat. My cat, Cindy, she's beautiful. She's cute. She is super smart. But she does whatever she feels like, whenever she feels like it. And when you're an architect and you're going to lead a team of, say, 30 or 40 really smart people, they're all going to be going down their own direction. This one doesn't shower. This one only wants green M&Ms. This person needs pizza, but it can only come from this place. And then this one needs to have Silver Oak wine with dinner, and I'm not joking. And this one will only work if they get Macallan 25 after dinner that you had to take them to on your corporate credit card. And you got to herd the cats, because when you're dealing with incredibly smart people, incredibly smart people don't think the way everybody else thinks. They got their own goofy ways of doing things. So you got to build a team out of super smart people and bring out the best in them. Herding cats. So bring a lot of tuna with you and get used to communicating with cats. And yes, I love cats, honestly. You should see my cat, Cindy. I adopted her from my wife when my wife was away as a present. And the next thing I realized, I got a cat that sits with me and follows me from room to room.
So
great, actually.
Cindy can teach you a lot. Let's put it that way. She teaches you a lot. Question for you. If we wanted to kind of summarize a little bit, this came to my mind when you spoke about the different skills. Would you really say that it would be leadership and public speaking skills then that are probably one of the key areas?
Yeah.
Okay. So just like Mike said, leadership skills, public speaking. The reason I don't mention presentation skills, I think if you have good public speaking skills, doing the rest of the presentation is going to become a little bit easier, because with public speaking, there also comes this form of charisma that you have to build, rapport with the people, right? So it is a form of presentation anyway, because you're presenting your ideas or product anyway. So public speaking skill is probably what came to my mind. And then, as Cindy always teaches us, there has to be a leadership component when it comes to cloud architecture roles or architecture roles in general.
Yep.
And I will say this though too, because I've actually experienced this in any type of lead role. So if you can be the principal engineer, the senior engineer, the team lead, those skills are always going to be needed. So you can always excel by just learning them. And the wonderful thing is, most techies, they'll let you take the lead in that. They don't want to talk about it. They just want to get the CLI. They want to fix something. They want to just implement something. They don't want to take the lead in actually having to coordinate or herd, as Mike said, or being able to communicate with the customer. They don't want to do that. So you're already going to be an advantage just applying some of these skills that you can learn through public speaking and leadership. And then the wonderful thing about that, depending on what you want to do, of course, you're not going to be staying long in those engineering positions. They're going to actually move you up because you're going to be too valuable for the organization. All right. Great question, Cam. Next question is from Mike, and let's see, Ayola. I hope I pronounced it correctly. But Mike is asking from LinkedIn. He says, you suggested building a GitHub on one of your videos. What is the type of content that shouldn't be on there if it is going to be architecture focused?
Okay, so Mike, I personally have never recommended GitHub for any architect ever. Now, in fact, I've never recommended GitHub for anything. So I will tell you that if you wanted to be a software developer, I would have a GitHub profile and I would show my code there. I really, really would. If I was a DevOps engineer, I would have a GitHub profile and I would show some of the code I've written. I would show some of the things I would do. But for the architect, we don't code. We don't configure. I wouldn't be an airplane pilot and showing people what a great flight attendant I was. I wouldn't be a doctor and show people what great nursing I would do. So no, I wouldn't do it for the architect. I do know where you're getting from. I had a guest on my show who was highly respectable and great at what he does. And on a LinkedIn post, he recommended if somebody wants to be an engineer, go out there and get a GitHub profile. And I agree with him on that. And then what happened is one of my students came and asked him about a GitHub profile because he didn't see that the word engineer was in the post that the person made on LinkedIn. And that's where that came from. But no, I don't recommend GitHub profiles ever for architects. I recommend architectural documents, RFP responses, presentations, thought leadership documents, things that are 100% related to architecture. But that's really the key. Now, if I was going to be an engineer, I would always do things. But for me, the key is to basically make sure that what you actually show is exactly what you do. Want to be a pilot? Your social media shows you in a flight suit. They show you in the cockpit, et cetera, et cetera. Want to be a nurse? You're seen wearing in a hospital. You're seen taking care of your patients, maybe a lab coat, a stethoscope. It's there. Want to be an architect? You put on your Armani suit, because in these executive roles, you'll need to wear one. Go in there, you show clips that you give in a presentation and things like that. Show your thought leadership documents, what kind of business problems you're solving, I'm doing. So I love a portfolio, but I want it to be really, really, really specific to what you did. Apologies if if my student who was on the YouTube stream, when my associate, who was a great architect, had answered that, got misinterpreted. That's for engineers, not architects.
Yep, wholeheartedly agree. Question from RCE Goat. Is it worth getting a PMP and a TOGAF on this path towards architects? I don't see many jobs with title of enterprise architect. Appears to be lower demand. I have my own take.
So
on it.
there
What do
are
you got, Michael?
there are a tremendous number of enterprise architect jobs. They're not always called enterprise architect. So they could be called chief architect in some places. They've got all kinds of funny names for this, but the enterprise architect is the top of the architects, focusing on the most business. But huge demand, but it goes by all kinds of wackadoodle names that you can see. So I would not get a project manager certification to be an architect. I would get a project manager certification to be a project manager, not an architect certification. So I would definitely not do that. Now, here's what TOGAF is, and I love TOGAF. TOGAF is a framework for architects who know how to be architects to design their architecture. So what does that mean? So let's say here we've got the AWS well-architected framework and we've got the TOGAF framework. Let's talk about the difference. In the TOGAF framework, you start with the executives of the organization and you find the organization's strategy. Now, the TOGAF doesn't teach you how to do that. It tells you to start there, and in your architect training, you have to know how to do that, and you have the right skills. It won't be part of TOGAF. Then in TOGAF, they say, please, now we need to go look at the business, how the business architecture is, the business processes that make that business. And then TOGAF, they would say the next step of your process is to work with the client to redesign the business processes based upon the future goals. TOGAF will not teach you how to do that, but it'll tell you that's step 2. Then TOGAF will say, step 3, evaluate the data. How does the organization use data? What's its data like? And then it will say step 3.5 is go work with the client to design a new data architecture based upon that new business architecture which you created. Then the next phase of it will be, now let's evaluate the organization's technology. See what they have today. See what they need to have in the future. Do a gap analysis between the two, but it won't teach you how to do that. So RCA Go. As long as you learn how to become an architect somewhere, yeah, the TOGAF is going to be great. It's going to teach you how to do it. So it's a framework. And why is it? It's a standard way of doing things. So Mark and I may take 2 clients, and Mark's an equally good architect as me, but we've come from different perspectives. I may start with the vision of the organization. Mark may tend to start at the CIO level, because that's where he's done most of his architectures. Still a C-suite person, right? Now, when I may actually start at the data center level, Mark may actually start at the network level because he's got more experience in the network than the data center. But what if we really want, but you see the way that it varies. So as Mark does his process and I do my process, we're a little different in our processes. When I practice medicine, it's because I do a lot of orthopedics, I start at the big toe and work my way up to the head. My wife comes from internal medicine. She starts with the head, then the eyes, then the ears, then the nose, then the throat, then the lymph nodes, then the carotid arteries, etc. And she does it the same way every time. Now, when I go to her office to do internal medicine, believe me, I'm not going to be as accurate with those internal medicine things because I'm geared towards gearing physical medicine, rehab, and orthopedics. Her process is ideally so optimized for internal medicine. Mine is orthopedics. You can see how 2 different people who are doing the same thing differently might get 2 different results. So all TOGAF is a framework that says, here's how you should approach the problem. And then it specifies which documents you should write in the process. It doesn't teach you how to write those documents either. So it's just saying this should be step 1, this should be step 2. Now, by comparison, the AWS well-architected framework doesn't really say much about the business at all. It doesn't address business process re-engineering, and it only addresses the technology. So where in that well-architected framework are they driving digital transformation? They're not. They're driving technology and deep engineering and design engineering, which is still needed. Do you think you can design an architecture without getting expert guidance from the vendors who made it? Probably not. They made the stuff, right? But if you're not addressing the business needs, what are you going to get? 70% of all architectures which fail to drive transformations, 70% of architectures are disasters. That's because people focus on the tech. So you need both. And it's just a framework. It's a structure. It's the process. It's the way that a McDonald's hamburger gets done the same way each time, no matter which way you're at, because they do it the same. Now, if Mark and I decided to cook our hamburgers differently, we got the same half pound of meat or quarter pound of meat, and he went on his oven, I went on my oven, and I'm Greek, so I put garlic, oregano, olive oil, and everything. And he uses the spices that he used in Germany growing up. Guess what? They might be spiced differently. And that's the thing. It's the same hamburger, but it's the process. That's so make sure you get the architect skills. But yeah, TOGAF is great. Just don't do anything with the PMP.
Yeah, and you said towards the path. I would always say that when it comes to design architecture, whatever type of kind of like certification that you might be going after should always be towards the end of that type of path. And the reason is because they make assumptions that you understand the underlying technology to begin with, right? So from that perspective, PMP, I would say probably wrong domain to begin with PMP. Project management has nothing to do with architecture. I'm sorry. PMP might only be worthwhile if you're working for a managed service provider and you're like an order coordinator, you work in the service, solutions kind of, a sales lead or something like that, but it doesn't work in architecture. TOGAF towards the end of it, Mike mentioned something very, very good, and I'm going to be a little bit more specific. What if you invest the time and the effort in getting your TOGAF, even as an enterprise architect, and then you notice you're within this company and they have their own framework that they use, and that's not TOGAF, right? So I would focus less on trying to figure out what certification I'm going to take, and rather figure out if I have to take a certification, is that going to help me learn something as I progress towards my ultimate goal? If it doesn't do that, and it's more kind of like window dressing, then I put it to the side as a potential. Then I have to focus on what will help me actually gain the knowledge that I need. So again, think anything you're going to need for your career development, think of them as, are they a necessity, or are they a good tool that I can use as a marketing or something like that? If it's marketing, on the side. If it's a necessity, work on it. Get those skills. That would be my approach.
And here's what we have to remember.
Yep.
You have to be able to do the job to clear the interview. A certification will build your brand and it'll get you an interview, but it won't teach you how to do the interview. They're not going to be asking you the things that are in your certification. They're going to be asking you concepts. So certification is window dressing. You have to have a house before you paint the walls and you put the drapes up. Make sure you get your house in order. Your foundation is your skill. Then you get the certification. Because, I've got people like Del Rabat hired as a cloud security architect with 0 certifications. Got Robert Welch hired as a cloud security architect with a cloud practitioner. But they had the skill for the job. So skills first, because you can be employed without any certifications. But you come to me with 5 certifications, and I ask you how you're designing your secure demilitarized zone for this web application, and you can't answer it. I can't hire you. I don't care if you've got 50 certifications. If I ask you, organization's weighted average cost of capital is this, and how would you use that to determine whether maybe a private OpenStack cloud or a Nutanix cloud is better than a public cloud? And you can't answer that because you don't understand finance. I can't employ you. But you don't have a TOGAF, but you know how to design systems that optimize business performance. I'm still hiring you if you've got the right skills.
Agreed. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I've worked with people that were brilliant. They were really good at what they did. They didn't have a certification. So again, a certification is a tool for a specific task. You may not even need that. Just keep that in mind. You may not even need to spend the time on getting one. So I hope that answers your question, RC.
Yeah.
All right. Next question is going to be, there you go. How about how to learn OpenStack? I think that's more the question for you, Mike, than me.
Yeah. Here's the way you learn OpenStack. You go to IBM, you read their documentation, and you will know OpenStack. Want to know it a little better? Read their documentation and go build it. But here's the thing: when you learn OpenStack, it's really written for a Linux administrator because they're the people that are going to go build it. It's more the how-to versus what it is. So if you want to learn OpenStack, make sure you learn cloud stuff. What is cloud stuff? Data center stuff. So make sure you learn what are virtual machines and how they work and what are containers and how are containers orchestrated. And make sure you learn the storage area networks like block storage, object storage, file storage. Make sure you understand the various databases that you can deploy on these virtual machines, relational databases, NoSQL database type kinds of things. Make sure you understand the business applications that can drive performance. Things like ERP systems, CRM systems, unified communication systems, what have you. Learn how to secure the stuff. Firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, access control lists, that kind of stuff. Learn how your systems need to be hardened. And then, guess what? Then when you read that OpenStack sort of information and you're learning OpenStack, you'll know what it means. And guess what? It'll be the same darn virtual machine that you have in OpenStack, that AWS made up the silly name EC2, and Google made up the silly name Compute Engine, and Azure used the name Azure Virtual Machine, which makes sense because it's a virtual machine. Oracle said, the heck with these marketing names, and we're just going to call it a virtual machine. Same thing. But then you'll know it. And then learning OpenStack might actually teach you cloud. After you've learned the cloud, it'll reinforce it. But that's how you do it. And you'll get good with it.
And it's a lot better than what I did when I learned virtualization. I found a server. I loaded the executable on a thumb drive. I plugged it in.
That's what I did.
And I'd be like, okay, what is this asking me? Do I click next here? Do I click? This is literally how I got ESXi up and running, the hypervisor. So follow what Mike just told you there. You don't have to do it the way we initially learned it. But again, resources were a little bit more sparse back in the day.
Yeah,
Let's put it that way.
They were much
Wonderful
more sparse
question.
in those days.
Yeah. Oh, and don't do it on production and equipment. Let me add that.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. Because we've seen people try to do that, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's got a built-in firewall, and if you do that firewall wrong, you will break the network. I've seen it.
Listen, and then we'll move on to the next question. The first time I got around networking equipment, I wasn't doing anything networking related yet, but my first kind of like entry was plugging in a cable that I shouldn't have plugged in. And the way I learned I shouldn't have plugged it in is because I plugged it in, walked away, and then the next thing you hear is just somebody screaming, "What happened to the network? The network went down." I didn't know it at the time, but that's what we call a layer 2 loop that I caused. Also a broadcast storm. So again, number one, don't plug in anything you see unplugged. And number two is don't do it with anything that looks like it's on and you shouldn't be touching it. And then find the room that specifically says lab and then try it. Anyway, small little experience. Okay, let's go on to the next question. It's from Raz7. Do you offer specific security architect program? If not, what is the specific program for that? Thank you.
Raz7, I'll tell you what we have been doing. So I have been training a tremendous number of cloud architects and cloud security architects and cloud network architects in our cloud architect career development program. And I've gotten a lot of people cloud security architect jobs. Delroy Batt, and I'll pick the ones that you would think would be hard to hire. Delroy Batt was an emergency medical technician on ambulances. We trained him. While he was in our program in about 3 weeks, we got him his first cybersecurity vulnerability management kind of admin job. And by the time he finished the program 9 months later, he was hired as a cloud security architect in our program. I will use the gentleman named R. And I'm not going to mention his last name or his full name because he just got a very critical high security environment job where I need to protect his name. But I will tell you, he left our program. He had applied for a job as a cloud security analyst. I don't know why, because we trained him to be an architect. And he went on that interview and they laughed and they said, I think you need to apply for the cloud security architect role. So he went and applied for that. And then they interviewed him and they said, it's too junior for you. We need to put you in the office of the CISO. And that is his first security architect job. Robert Welch came through my program. Now, he did have a background in stuff. We got him a cloud security architect job. So Raz7, I've been teaching such heavy duty security in our cloud architect program that we're getting a lot of people cloud security architect jobs there. Now, RAS 7, I will tell you, I might make a dedicated focused cloud security thing in the future. And I'm not saying that I will, or I'm not saying that I won't, but I've gotten so many people cloud security architect jobs. And one of our students actually went on one of his last presentation interviews at one of the bigger cloud providers. And he presented his demilitarized zone for the web application that they asked him to design. He got halfway through presenting it. They said, all right, enough is enough. You know more about security than we do. Now they started asking him business questions. And of course, you know, he was a college student when he came to us, and he got hired as a solution architect 1, not an associate architect. That's an intern, a real solution architect. And he's already been promoted to solution architect 2. So we get heavy there. So that's how we've been doing it. We've been doing it in our cloud architect program, having separate tracks for the cloud security architects and separate tracks for cloud network architects. But I may build a completely focused security program in the future too. I don't know if I want to pull it out, because, you know, by doing it the way we do, we have people that are so good in cloud and so good in security, they really understand how it works, because architecture is about understanding all the elements. So I don't know. Right now we're putting them through there, and I've gotten lots of people hired. Do I at some point in the future make another one dedicated to security? Very possibly.
Let's just put it this way. Remember how we discussed that was a trend, security going forward? Just keep your eye out for things. Something might pop up. Not giving anything away.
If it really matters, as a rule, we typically have a way to get people into their ultimate jobs.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's go on to the next question. From Cam, what kind of support and resources are provided during the training process?
Okay, wow, a lot actually. So we actually have 3 days a week of live classes. And in these classes, we will design architectures, we will teach architecture. Students inside of these classes can actually ask questions. So there's that. We also have 1 to 2 days of office hours per week, where people can just pop in and ask any question they need to about the course. Now, we also have a global Slack community that's a few thousand people strong that are only Go Cloud Careers people. And there's always someone that's willing to answer a question anywhere in the world pretty much at any time. We've got a lot of working groups together in between our students, and we do that. Now, of course, when we're in a program, you know, in live classes, you participate, but in between live classes, there's a lot of things to do. Whether it be practicing your interview, tuning your resume, building a presentation, designing an architecture, you name it, you'll be responsible for it. And you will turn these systems in. And when you turn these systems in, one of our team will give you feedback on it and grading you and give you guidance to make you better. So there is constant format inside of our program. And we've got clients at every company you can possibly imagine, Cam. I've got students like the college kids. I call them the college kids because their first job was solution architect at AWS. And other than being a waiter, or in other college jobs, which they had, like Yvonne Tammet, Jordan Kittico, Coyote. We've got stay-at-home moms like Balwinder who are hired by Microsoft. We've got social workers like Noah Parker getting the first architect job, mental health people like Jennifer Ema. And of course, I've got people like Pritipal St. John, who had 20 years of engineering experience. We trained him and turned him into an architect, and he got a great enterprise architect job. Or Jermaine was selling landscaping gear, but he got a great enterprise architect job after. So, you know, we do what we need to. And here's the thing, Cam, between our training and everybody else, we are not a boot camp. I detest boot camps. We keep students in our training program until the day they're hired. So everybody gets a year, at least a year in the live classes. They've got unlimited time in our community, and we never take their content away as long as their accounts are current. So you'll be in the program until you're hired. And that's why I don't do batches, because I can repeat a BGP lecture every 4 months to make sure that no matter when you came in, you got it. And all the stuff in our portal and all those other things are self-paced. But I can't guarantee that you and somebody else learn at the same speed. You may learn faster than the next person. What if somebody needs a year and somebody else needs 9 months? In a boot camp, they kick you out, and while you're kicked out and you're not there, you're forgetting stuff each day. In our program, you're there until you're hired. So I really want you to do well. So in our program, the only way you're not successful is if you quit on you and you give up because it's too hard for you. And nobody needs to give up. We can all be great. We can all achieve anything we want. Look, I had 13 orthopedic surgeons told me I'd never walk again after an injury. Now, I'm not going to pretend I go running, but I do walk now. So, there's that. So we can all do what we choose to if we put our minds, heart to it, follow the right plan, and get the best access to training. I'd love to help you, Ken. But if not, at least attend our free trainings, and we'll give you as much as we can.
Yep. You always have the opportunity. We have these sessions. We got our webinars also on Thursday on Zoom. If you wanted to join, you can always ask questions. We kind of look at these sort of like office hours for many people that are not part of the program. Mm-hmm. But within the program, we do provide many opportunities, not just office hours for non-technical stuff, but also during the different programs, we do kind of like a ask us anything type of question where Mike or maybe sometimes just myself, or maybe usually both of us, we kind of sit together and we try to answer any questions that the students might have. And this is more like agnostic in regards to, it doesn't have to be cloud specific or so forth, but whatever a student might have a question for, they'll ask them, and we generally try to provide them with some type of feedback. Even if it's as simple as, hey, can you, I had a student recently, can you let me know in regards to a presentation? Sure, let's schedule something, we get it on a book, let's take a look. I'll try my best to give you some feedback in regards to what you were looking for. So plenty of opportunities to interact with us. All right, let's move on to the next question. It is from Kali Prasad. How do you guys speak for 10 to 15 minutes and still sound informational and valuable for a single question? In my team calls, I feel I am missing this skill. Do you teach this in an architect program?
So, Callie, that is a really great question. And the answer is yes, we do coach those because you need this to be an architect. But you have to understand Mark and I are different than the way the average person's been trained. First, I've got 25 years as an architect and 2 decades helping people get their jobs. And Mark and I have chosen to go deep versus going wide. For example, and I'm not going to do it, but if I ask Mark, what are the 7 types of LSAs that exist in Area 0, or the 5 types, and he could answer it and tell me what each one does instantly because he got deep. If I said to Mark, I need to know how to set up a network that can fail and recover traffic within 40 milliseconds, he would understand, we're talking about like an OSPF or ISIS single area, RSVP signaling, label switching, and signaling MPLS traffic engineered paths. He would just know that because when other people get 10 or 12 associate certifications, we would get 1 expert certification that we'd have to read 50 to 75,000 pages for. So this is our world. This is the only thing I know. I know how to practice internal medicine because I learned it in my youth, and I know how to be an architect and get architect people hired. I don't know how to paint my house. I don't know how to cut my grass. I don't know how to change the oil in my car. I literally have focused to be a subject matter expert on this, on career optimization, so I can talk about what I know. But a lot of people learn a lot of different things, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong. But I've chosen to be an expert because that's where the opportunities tend to be. So there's that. But also, it's a skill. Mm-hmm. I can tell you, I didn't start out this way. I'm an introvert. Yeah, I know, Callie, that's going to sound crazy. I am an introvert. One day, my manager, who's Alvin DeCosta, he's a VPO right now at NVIDIA. He and I, we came up together. We used to help each other vote for each other's promotions. Really great guy. And, when he and I were younger, we practiced these things. We learned how to do it and we grow into it. But here's the thing. You want one of these big architecture roles? You'll learn. You'll have people coach you. You'll have people train you, and it'll become natural for you. You'll get focused training that'll teach you all the stuff you need in your career. And throughout time, you focus on what you do and you focus on it well. And then there's almost nobody out there that's an expert on something. And just by being that level of an expert, people will come to you because it's easy to find a jack of all trades and a master of none. But it's very hard to find an expert. And when you've got knee arthritis and there's one person that's known to be the best knee surgeon over there in Vail, Colorado, that guy does 10, 15 knee surgeries a day at $20,000 each in cash, and he doesn't take insurance because he's that good. When you focused on trying to be a family practice or internal medicine, which is our background, my background, I should say, my wife's background, now I got to deal with a little diabetes, a little hypertension, a little arthritis, a little Alzheimer's disease, a little this kind of dystrophy, that kind of dystrophy. We can't go that deep. So I hope that answers your question. This has been my life's work.
Like what Mike said, practice. And also you got to something keep in mind. We do prepare. I mean, these kind of sessions are a little bit more off the cuff because we don't really know the questions that any of you might ask us at any point. But when it comes to lectures, right, we prepared. I know for myself, and I tried this unless it was an emergency, those do happen. But I've had instances where I was called in last minute into one of these Teams calls. I had no clue what this was about. I was simply told, Mark, you need to be there. Guess what? Instead of just being part of the breathing match that generally happens on these Teams calls, I wanted to learn why I was there. So I would now just ask inquisitive questions. What's going on? Actually, I started with, hello, my name is Mark. I'm with so-and-so. I would ask how everybody's doing. Could somebody please explain to me what type of particular issue are we dealing with? Is this an implementation issue? Are we talking about trying to figure out if you guys need a different type of solution? So I ask open-ended questions, but still trying to get to a goal. So I don't know what your team session is for, but let's say that you can prepare for them. Prepare some good questions that will get you towards an outcome. That's what I would do in this case. Aside from that, you have to practice these things. We mentioned leadership and public speaking skills. You do have to practice your actual skills, meaning, let's say you just record yourself for 5 minutes a day. Just try that. Just talk in front of the camera for 5 minutes. Start off by just any ramblings that come to your mind, just to get comfortable of speaking, and then maybe start preparing something. Could be something about, let's say, storage. Pick one storage solution. Talk about it for 5 minutes. If you want to start reading it off from whatever you wrote down word by word, that's okay. But start off like that. Get comfortable with the idea of talking in front of people. That is a big fear of people, big fear that generally people have. And if you can kind of overcome that, that'd be great. But specifically for your team's meetings, is understand why you're there. Once you know why you're there, now you can act a certain behavior. If you just get called in and there really isn't much for you to say, guess what? Silence is golden. That's part of it, about the executive presence that we talk about. You don't always need to fill the silence too.
Nope. Oh, that's important.
Okay. So just keep that in mind, but definitely practice. And it is quite a bit of a facet of our training program too. You'll have a lot of little mini presentations where you have to record yourself. You'll have to actually do that. Then you'll have to write them out. And then we encourage everybody to, during our live classes, is have your camera on. Get comfortable of looking at the camera, people seeing you, and then feel free to talk. It's a safe environment. You don't have to be perfect. Mike and I, we're not perfect. Just remember that and prepare. Great question, though.
And great advice there, Mark. We can do a few more. I know we're running low on time, but going over, but I'm still happy to.
All right. You let us know when you got to go. So this is from Anthony Panzarella from LinkedIn. It says, thank you for all you're doing. What are your thoughts on the CCNP NCORE certification? I feel it dives deep into engineering opposed to architecture.
So Anthony, here's my view. As a rule, you want to be a cloud architect. What is the cloud? Somebody else's network and data center. That's it. So, if you don't know networking, you will never know architecture. Because if you don't understand network, and networking is the foundation of the system, and you don't understand it, everything will collapse. So here is my perspective. I like to see people to have 2 to 3 professional level certifications. When I see an associate certification, here's what it means to me. Possibly almost ready to do something. When I see 5 associate certifications, I see possibly almost ready to do something and highly distracted. Can't figure out what they want to do or is misguided. And that concerns me from the perspective of a hiring manager, because if someone doesn't know what they want to be, I really can't hire them on my team because I need somebody that knows what they want to do. And if someone can't figure out how to focus their efforts, again, it concerns me because it looks like somebody didn't do their research before they went out there and did stuff. And when I hire architects, for example, I need people that do planning, not people that just act. I need them to think, plan before they act, because it's a planning role. So there's that. So if you have a cloud provider's professional certification and you have a TOGAF as your second, you need a third, generally speaking. So what would that third be? If you want to have better technical skills, chances are the CCNP is great. If you want to have better security skills, the CISSP is great. That's my third. I'd say networking and data center or security. So I will tell you this, Anthony. I prefer in today's world the CISSP over the CCNP for that third certification. I can tell you a gentleman named Q. He's still negotiating a salary. Q came to me 2 years ago. He was a Forex trader. I have no idea why, but he decided he wanted to go from there to being a cloud security architect. Q came to me. It took Q about 18 months because he wasn't consistent in the program, but Q got hired as a security analyst. He should have waited. He didn't have the faith in himself. He passed the CISSP, went and got multiple interviews for a security architect, and Q was offered a security architect position. So I'm gearing more now in today's world toward the CISSP. Networking has been changing to some degree. A lot of it's more virtualized than it was before. A lot of it's more software defined than it was before. So I think security is more pervasive everywhere, even though the network's there. So for that third one, would you do the CCNP or the CISSP? Unless your goal was networking, I'd probably do the CISSP right now. There are very few certifications that make people say, I would like to interview someone. And the CISSP is one. Truth be told, from a networking perspective, the CCNP is fairly helpful as well. Because when you interview a CCNP, I'd say there's a 15 to 20% chance they know something about networking, which is a lot. Because that means 1 out of every 7 CCNPs that you interview could potentially have the skills for the job. That's a lot. With the CCNA, if you interview 100, 1 or 2 may have the skills to do the job. But I'll tell you, the best network engineer I ever worked with is Ted Kay in New Jersey. I don't think Ted graduated high school. He definitely didn't have any Cisco certifications. And he was the best network engineer I ever met. This guy would go in there, figure out every vendor's technology, figure out how to troubleshoot it, understood it. He was just great. So skill always matters more than certifications to me. But I still like the CCNP, although I like the CISSP better in today's world, especially because the CCNP used to be 4 exams. And now it's only 2. So Cisco did the inflation, meaning they cut away half of it and gave you the same certification with half of the content. And employers are now going, well, yeah, these new CCNPs seem to know a lot less stuff than those old CCNPs because they used to have to know twice as much as before. So that's reducing the effectiveness of that certification as well. And Cisco is now trying to position themselves as a software development company versus a networking company. And I don't think that's helping with the marketing of those certifications either.
And Anthony, next time we have a Q&A, an open forum during one of our classes. We'll dive a little bit deeper into it. But what are my thoughts on the actual Encore exam? Number one, you have no choice. You have to take it if you want your CCNP. So that's one. Number two, it is quite wide, not very deep. And one of the issues that can come up if you're just doing that one first is you're going to be missing out on some of the details that you'll need. So I personally, while you do have to take the Encore, probably to round up your CCNP experience, and I'm looking at them because they have changed a little bit because recently Cisco did a little update. They do incremental updates these days. But for example, when you think about if you wanted to move into some type of cloud architecture as you are, since you're part of the program, you would definitely have to take the Advanced Routing Services exam. That teaches you a lot about the OSPF when it comes to the multi-area design. They're still teaching you ERGRP, which is interesting. You're, of course, going to be learning in regards to MPLS Layer 3 VPNs. So that's going to be important to understand. You're going to get a little bit of MPLS, a little bit in regards to what the different components of that, what make those VPN services up. So that's definitely an exam you're going to have to take. You're going to go deep into the prefix list, access lists, and all those type of configuration. Then definitely I will pick up the designing Cisco Enterprise Networks. That's going to be important because if you're going to be an architect, you got to kind of work on the idea of design mindset. And I'm a little biased to this. I would probably still recommend people to go for the SD-WAN certification of Cisco. And the only reason I mentioned that is SD-WAN is a cloud connectivity option. And Cisco does actually very good in teaching you at least their implementation of SD-WAN. But the great thing about what Cisco does with that is they have a slew of documentation. Like you want to know how the actual overlay routing protocol works, which is a beefed up version of BGP. They got an entire actual design and configuration document just on that. So you can learn a lot from that. Aside from that, to be honest with you, is when it comes to actual cloud architecture, you will have advantages of also taking some type of data center kind of path too. That's going to help you a lot too. But again, you want to understand about all these type of certifications, they're operations based, right? So that's why when you say they go deep into engineering, they definitely do. That's what they were designed. No pun intended. They were designed to do that. But, and we discussed this, I want to say, I think during a different Q&A on YouTube, actually. A lot of the materials that architects are going to go through is going to be very similar, if not the exact documentation that also engineers will go through. The difference is what you will have to focus on. If you're willing to take these exams, you'll have to go down the engineering task because you'll have to know how to configure them. If I was just to study this information without actually wanting to gain it, I would not focus on the configuration because the configuration is going to be either based on ISO or ISXE, whatever they may be. So they're going to be based on that network operating system. If you do Juniper, they're going to have Juno OS or something else. Arista is going to have their own. I think it's EOS. So just keep that in mind. But once we have the Q&A, we'll discuss a little bit more and when we have a little bit more time. And you can come off mute too and give us your thoughts on it. But it's not a bad exam if you're looking for network network-based certification, but you'll need at least definitely the advanced routing and services. That is a must. Out of all of them, that would be your second exam. And then I would pick and choose, go with SDN and design or go with SD-WAN and design. So basically you're picking up, again, you're doing like 3 or 4 of them. And we got a question from Mr. Dominic123. You mentioned that you have cloud application architects in the program. What do they do and how can you become one?
Okay, Mr. Dominic, and I'm not recommending the application architect career as a primary career. It is a good career, but it's not one that we teach. So why do I have application architects in our training program? Well, if you look at what a cloud architect does or an enterprise architect, we're really designing everything. In today's world, the cloud is everything. Every company's got getting a private cloud, or they have one. Either it's a VMware cloud, an OpenStack cloud, or a Nutanix cloud. They're now all connecting to, the various cloud platforms. So, what does that really mean? It means the cloud architect is mostly infrastructure, containers, container orchestration, storage area networks. Maybe we get involved in some databases. How do we design the demilitarized zone? How do we design that stuff? The cloud is just data center stuff. So, there's that. So, we need network architects because network architecture is part of cloud architecture. How do you design for the remote access? How do you design the cloud to cloud, your VPC pairing, all of it, your data center to the cloud? How do you optimize your networking in the cloud? So we need networking, and network architecture is part of there. That's a specialty thing. So I have multiple CCIE network architects teaching network architecture to our cloud architects. Why? Because a network architect knows 10 times more about networking than a cloud architect will, because that's all they do, and the cloud architects will do everything. I have identity and access management architects periodically come in. Isaac used to do it, and he would teach, identity and access management, because that is different than security. I occasionally have a security architect come in and teach security, although I usually fulfill those roles because I've got a big cybersecurity background and teach cybersecurity. I have application architects come in and teach application architecture, like APIs and API structure and application integration and application patterns, what have you. Because an architect probably needs to know a little about that, and who knows the most about it? The application architects. So I have people like Angelo, who's an application architect. Lohit was a software developer before we trained him, now works at AWS as an application architect, come in and teach application architecture. Guess what? Periodically, I might have an AI architect come in and teach some AI things. So the key to be a great architect is really working with a multidisciplinary team, specialists from everything, kind of like medicine. You got your primary care doctor, your orthopedic surgeons, your rheumatologists for arthritis, your cardiac surgeons for the heart, your cardiologists that do the heart, your neurologists that work on the nerves. So I bring in a team of experts to make sure my students have the best. Bring in business school professors, marketing professors, you name it, because we need to be great. So that's why I have them in a program. What does an application architect do? Here's what they do. They design applications to improve and optimize their organization's business performance. So they do everything a cloud architect would, but they don't focus on the network. They focus purely on the applications. How would the application to be designed? What are the patterns that would be going to use for these kinds of things? That's what the application architect tends to do. How do you become one? Well, you've got to learn about application architecture, learn about all the application patterns, learn how applications are designed, and learn all that application-y stuff. I don't want to comment too much on it because I am not an application architect, but you need to understand that. And then you also need to understand that it's not an engineering position. So you will need to learn how to present, learn how to lead, learn how to respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, learn how to sell, learn how to facilitate meetings, learn how to give executive briefings, learn how to write thought leadership documents, the things that architects do every day. But great career for people that come from a software development background that want to future-proof themselves against AI, because you can't replace an architect with AI, because all that leadership, sales, meeting, communication skills, it is a great path out of software development into an architecture career on the applications. Of course, we can take people from software development and networking and move them into bigger careers like cloud architecture or enterprise architecture. But for people that love applications and love application design, application architecture is a great career.
Yep.
Let's go to the next one, because we're
going to have to wrap up here shortly. All right, go ahead with the next question, Tyrone. Question from Cam. What are the common challenges faced by new cloud architects? And also, how can someone who is new or is a new architect prepare to overcome them?
So this is the best question in the world. So here's the thing. If you're properly trained, it won't be hard. So there's some kind of a cloud engineer, Efemi, that posted something to the internet, and he focused, I've now been a cloud engineer for about 1.5 years, and I'm terrified. I'm learning every day. And I responded and said, if you're terrified, it's related to your training. The training that you received, you need better. So when you're properly trained and you know what to do, it's easy. When you don't know what you don't know, it is terrifying. So Cam, I'm going to actually tell you what happened for my first tech job, and I'll give you the example. I was hired by WorldCom. My previous job was practicing internal medicine. Well, I wanted a networking job so bad. I went to a boot camp for the CCNP. I did the CCNA. I did the CCDP. I did an MCSE, and I learned real quick that employers don't care about certifications. They learn skills. So then I learned what skills that I needed, and I trained them. Now, Cam, I knew that I had an imperfect resume. So I bought training, and it was well over $20,000 of training, because in those days we didn't have online stuff. You had to go find some place and be taught by an expert. You couldn't go to Udemy and be taught by someone that never had the job before. You actually had to pay to be taught well. So I got good training. I then read every single day. And because my first job I went in as a network engineer, not a network admin, I went and built the stuff. Now, Cam, I got to tell you, when I got my first job, I was terrified. In fact, I was so terrified, I told my wife I was going to get an extra credit card. And she says, okay, fine. What do we need an extra credit card for? I said, I am going to go buy lunches, dinners, and drinks for everybody I work with every day, so they don't know what I don't know, and they're just going to like me. So she laughs hysterically, and she said, Mike, You invested more than a car cost in your training. You spent 10, 12, 14 hours a day, every day studying for the last 6 months. I think you're going to be okay. And I said, I want to get the credit card. And she says, don't spend more than $10,000 buying lunches, dinners, and drinks before us. She says, you're going to be fine. Well, I got this credit card with a giant limit in those days because I had my medical career, so people were willing to give it to me. And I got on the job on the first day, and I did take people to lunch. And as I was lunch, they started babbling about tech stuff, and I knew more than them. And I will tell you, within 2 weeks, I was training people in that organization. And my manager came over to me and said, Mike, I don't understand this. I bring you on as a senior network engineer. It's your first tech job. All of a sudden, I don't see you doing a lot of stuff, but I see everybody else doing, 50% more. And he's like, they didn't know how to do these things. What's going on? They said, I should talk to you. I said, well, Dave, I said, I had these skills. I noticed there were some gaps. So I started teaching people. I said, all these people are passing the CCNP in about 3 weeks. I got a boot camp running. I'm teaching it for free. And he's like, keep doing it, Mike. Within 6 months, I was an architect, and I never had a day where I didn't know what I was doing because I was properly prepared. So here's when you're going to be comfortable. When you know what you know and you know it's good, you'll never be there. You'll never be scared. You're just going to know what to do. If you don't know because you weren't properly trained, it's going to be hit or miss. If you have the skills, you're going to know. If not, you're going to go home, read 1,000 pages a day, every day until you know something. And you are going to go there, and it is going to be a brutally experience. Hopefully you're successful in your first job. And you don't see that 6 months and then you find another job. But if you're properly trained, and I don't care whether you train with us or you train with someone else, you have to have the right skills. You can't fly a plane and hope you know how to fly the plane when you've got 250 passengers on board. You better know you can fly the plane. So new cloud architects that are properly trained. Ivan Tamba was a 24-year-old kid. He was working at a restaurant before he came to us when AWS hired him as a partner solutions architect. He was a solution architect 1. A year later, he was hired as a solution architect 2. Jordan recently got promoted as well because they were good. So they got in, people looked at him and said, who are these people? And they got there. So there shouldn't be any major challenges if your skills are good. If your skills are not good and they start talking to you about business problems and you don't know business, you're going to be terrified. If you don't understand the underlying technology and how it works, but you know how to configure it, and you're at the client site and they're talking about their data pipelines and you don't know what that is, or data ingestion, data this, data that, you're going to be in trouble. And you're going to have to figure out how to learn the skills that you needed to have before you actually got there. So how do you prepare? You get good training. When you take training, wherever you take it, you learn everything. When you're in class and they cover something that you don't understand in class, you ask a question in class. You look it up. You research it, and you research it and research it and research it until you know it. And you will know when you know it. And here's the reason you can tell. You go take a Udemy course on AWS. Here's what you're going to hear. Blah, 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 blah. And it's going to give you a headache. You're going to give up. Then you're going to get a practice test, and you're going to memorize questions and answers until you pass the test. That's what everybody does. And why is that? Because all these people that have made courses on Udemy, for the most part, have never had the job. They don't know what they know, and they don't even know what they don't know. And when you know it well enough, you can explain it very simply. So when you take this information and you learn it, you find the next person that you know, someone that you love that doesn't know anything about technology, and you explain it to them. And if you can explain it simply and correctly to them, you will have the level of knowledge that you necessarily need. I used to like to talk to my internal medicine wife because she doesn't know anything about networking, but she is super smart about medicine. And if she could understand it, I used to explain things to my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is the cutest, sweetest person in the world. She came to America barely speaking Greek, speaking only Greek, barely speaking English. She went to school to learn to speak English. And I would try to explain it to her in English. And when she understood, I was like, wow, I'm really good. But I would also try to explain it to her in Greek and see which I did better. She understood the Greek better than the English, even though my English is better than my Greek, but what have you. But I used her as an example because she wasn't a tech person. Explain the tech to a non-tech person. And when they get it, chances are you know it well enough to be able to explain it. And you'll be highly successful.
So definitely a confidence problem, right? You're going to feel less confident. And the great thing is, at least when it comes to our training, you're going to be on camera so much that it's going to build your confidence. It's going to help you overcome it. But we also have specific things that we ask students to do and try to overcome these nerves that they have. We have them go through specific exercises. Now, some of them are a little bit more in a specific program, like if it's going to be interview related, even during, I forgot what it was called now, Mike. Our annual conference that we have too, there's also sessions in there that help students or those that join us to overcome their nerves. I know Mike very often has a little exercise where he purposefully puts you into a situation, generally speaking, kind of contorting your body a little bit, and then having you get up your heart rate, kind of trying to stimulate it, right? And then guess what? Explain the tech. And, again, it takes training and it takes preparation. You're not going to always be able to overcome every minute kind of like nerves that you have. I think many of us, we still have that, even though we may have done some type of public speaking for years. We still have a little nerves here and there. But just know it is important to not doubt yourself. And that's really the important part. No, nerves are going to be there, but don't doubt yourself if you know you had good training, that you're prepared for it. Right? Did you want to finish up, Mike?
Well, let's take the last one. We were supposed to go 2 to 4 today. You all had good questions. I was having fun. Mark was having fun. So I said, let's go. But I know Tyrone, who's behind the scenes, is in Cape Town right now. So I think it's 10 o'clock at night for him. So we'll do one more. And then I want to invite you. Join our How to Get Your First Cloud Architect webinar on Thursday. It'll be live. It'll be on Zoom. We'll go over the role, what we do, how to prepare for the role, every skill you actually need. And of course, you'll be able to ask us questions live on Zoom. So register for that. There's also a free ebook on how to get your first cloud architect job in the description of this video. Free ebook on how to get your first AI architecture job. All kinds of free resources for you to download in there. And of course, we're going to do some free AWS training at the end of the month. Join that. We will finish on Sunday, on Sunday's question here.
Right. Question from Sunday is, what do information security architects do?
They design, present, and sell the security solutions for our customer. So they will determine an organization's security needs. They will design a security strategy, the overarching security policy. Then they will determine what kind of data loss prevention the organization needs and create a data loss prevention type strategy. They will work with the identity and access management access to determine what the identity strategy is for the organization that somebody else will, of course, build. They will design the remote access solutions. They will design the demilitarized zones for the applications that need to be visible. They will determine an end-to-end encryption strategy. So how do you encrypt the network, the data as it's moving? How do you encrypt the applications? What levels? How do you encrypt the storage? What level of encryption is needed at the storage, for example? What types of tools are going to be used for, say, SIEM systems to help the organization evaluate the logging and figure out what is going on? What kind of security needs do we have? Do we need to hire some ethical hackers to do some penetration testing to give us information into the weaknesses of our systems? So creating that security strategy, determining how the systems need to be protected, creating that strategy, and then creating that architecture, which then that strategy could then be given down to the engineers to go build it. That's typically what we do. So going to finish on that. We ran an extra hour late, a little more than that, but I had fun. So I hope you guys were having a good time. If you're new to the channel, please give it a like and subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new things. Please join us on some of our free webinars, which we have coming soon. The Cloud Architect webinar on Thursday, how to become a cloud architect. And I look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care, everyone. It was fun spending the afternoon with you.
Goodbye, everyone.